Hello! Welcome, welcome. Good evening. Turn that down just a little bit. Hi! Early gang, let's go! Welcome in. Welcome to tonight's spoopy storytellings. I have scoured Reddit. And I have found an actual author, not that they're not all actual authors, but I have found an author that was published and has given credit, or backtrack, has given permission for these stories to be read, and I will be giving credit in the description in the VOD upload. So, this is some stories by Travis Brown, also known as Grand Theft Motto on Reddit. I did pick out 3, and they are, one is a short story and 2 are longer stories, so I don't know if we'll get to all of them tonight, but we'll definitely get 2. What a good name, right? It's a really good name. Anyway, so we have Something Walks Whistling as the short story. Oh. Stack Sama, thank you for the follow. Welcome in. Came at a good time. We just started. Let's see the other ones. What were they? Sorry, I'm on his website. The other ones are House with 100 Doors, which is, I think, a longer one. And then the last one is The Demon at the Window. So we're gonna get through what we can. I don't know if we'll get through all of them tonight, because I think 100 Doors is a longer one, but we'll try. Thank you for the head pats. I do have water, so hopefully my voice doesn't give out. I do have some snacks if in between stories. So we're gonna start with Something Walks Whistling. Full name being Something Walks Whistling past my house every night at 3:03. Hope everyone's ready. Get your blankies, your snackies, some water. We begin. Every night, no matter the weather, something walks down our street whistling softly. You can only hear it if you're in the living room or the kitchen when they walk by, and it always starts at exactly 3:03. The sound starts faint, somewhere near the beginning of the lane near the Carson place. We're towards the middle of the street, so the whistling moves past us before fading away into the direction of the cul-de-sac. When I was younger, my sister and I would sneak into the kitchen some nights to listen. Mom and Dad didn't like that, and we'd catch hell if they found us out there, but they were never too hard on us since they always stuck to the big rule. Don't try to look at whatever was whistling. My neighborhood was a funny place. I lived there since I was 6 and I love it. The houses are small but well kept, good-sized yards, plenty of places to roam. There are a lot of other kids here my age. I turned 13 back in October. We grew up together and would always play foursquare in the cul-de-sac or roam around the back porch to the front, from back porch to back porch in the summer. This was a good place to grow up. I'm old enough to see it. And there's only the 2 strange things here, the night whistling and the good luck. The whistling never bothered me much. Like I said, I couldn't even hear it from my bedroom. But Mom and Dad don't like talking about it, so I've stopped asking questions. My dad is a strong guy, tall and calm. He has an accent since he moved to the US as a kid. His family, my grandparents, they're from the islands. That's what they call it. My dad, the only time he isn't so calm is if the whistler comes up. He talks a little quicker then, eyes move faster, and he tells us not to think about it so much and always to remember the one rule, the big rule. Don't try to look outside when the whistler goes past. Not that we couldn't even look if we wanted. See, there were shutters on the inside of every window, thick pieces of heavy canvas that pull down from the top and latch to the bottom of the window frame. Each latch even has a small lock, about the size of what you'd find on a diary. My dad locks those shutters every night before we all go to bed and keeps the key in his room. My mom, I don't know what she thinks about the whistling. I've seen her in the living room before 3:03, when the sound starts. I could see her if I cracked my door open just an inch to peek. She's not out there often. At least I haven't caught her much. But once or twice a month, I think she sits out there on our big red couch just listening. The whistler has the same tune every night. It's cheerful. Da 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 dum. Da 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 dum. Remember how I said there were two odd things about where I live? Well, besides our night whistler, everyone in my neighborhood is really lucky. It's hard to explain, and Dad doesn't like us talking about this part much either, but good things just seem to happen to people around here a lot. Usually it's small things, winning a radio contest, or getting an unexpected promotion at work, or finding some arrowheads buried in the yard. You know, the authentic kind. Oh, thank you. My voice is so cozy. Oh, I think we hiccuped there. Hello, are we back? We hiccup? What happened? No. Okay. Well, hello? Are we back? Sorry about that. There we go. The weather is pretty good and there's no crime, and everybody's gardens bloom extra bright in the fall. We're back! Sorry about that. We had a little internet hiccup. Now my, now my model doesn't want to work. 1 second. I think my phone lost connection? Question mark? It's fine. You're not here to look at me, you're here to listen. Anyway, sorry. We're going back. Everyone's a little bit lucky. The weather is pretty good, and there's no crime, and everybody's gardens bloom extra bright in the fall. A million little blessings, I've heard my mom say about living here. But the main reason we stay here, why we moved here in the first place, is my sister Nola. She was born very sick, something with her lungs. We couldn't even bring her home when she was born, only visit her in the hospital. She was so small, I remember. Small even compared to the other babies. The machine had to breathe for her. We moved into our house here to be closer to the hospital. As soon as we moved here, Nola started getting better. The doctors couldn't figure it out. They chalked it up to whatever they were doing, but we all could tell that they were confused. But my parents knew. Even I knew. Nola was getting better. Was just another of the million little blessings we got for living in our neighborhood. So that's why we stayed even after we found out that for every small miracle that happens here every day, now and then, some bad things happen. But they only happen if you look for the whistler. See, our neighborhood was a welcoming committee. They would show up with macaroni casserole in a gift basket and manila folder whenever someone new moves in. They're very friendly. 4 people showed up when we moved in 7 years ago. The committee made small talk, gave me a Snickers bar, and took turns holding Nola. It was her first week out of the hospital, so they were extra careful. Then the committee asked to speak to my parents in private, so I was sent to my room, where I still managed to hear nearly every word. The welcoming committee told my parents about how nice the neighborhood was, really exceptionally, hard to explain kind of nice. And then they told my parents about the even harder to explain whistling that happened every morning at 3:03 and ended at the tick of 3:05. The group, our new neighbors, warned my parents that the whistling was quiet, would never harm or hurt us as long as we didn't look for what was making the sound. This part they stressed, and I pushed my ear into the door, straining to hear them. People who went looking for the whistler had their luck change, sometimes tragically. A black cloud would hang over anyone that looked. Anything that could go wrong would. The manila envelope the committee brought over contained newspaper clippings, stories about car crashes and ruined lives, public deaths, and freak accidents. Not everyone dies, I heard the head of the committee tell my dad. The life goes out of them. Even if they live, there's no light in them ever again. No presence. My mom, I could tell she wasn't taking it seriously. She kept asking if this was some prank they play on new neighbors. At one point, my mom got angry, accused the committee of trying to scare us out of our new home, asked them if they were racist on account of my dad being from the islands. My dad calmed her down, told her that we could tell our new neighbors were sincere and they were just trying to help us. He explained that he grew up hearing these kinds of stories from his mom and that he knew that there were strange things that walked among us. Among us? Some of those strange things were good and some were bad, but most were just different. After the committee left, Dad went out to the hardware store, bought us the canvas blinds and latches and the locks, and installed them on every window in the house after dinner. That first night in our new house, I crept out of my room at 3 a.m., only to find my dad awake sitting on the living room couch, holding my baby sister. My dad held up his finger in a shush motion and patted the couch next to him. I sat and we waited. At exactly 3:03, we heard the whistling. Orion, thank you for the resub. Welcome in. It came and went just like our neighbors said. The whistling returns each night and we never look, and we enjoy our million little blessings every day. Nola breathes on her own, and she's grown into a strong, clever girl. My dad even joined the welcoming committee. We don't get new neighbors often. Why would anyone want to leave? But when a new family moves in, my dad and the committee bring the macaroni casserole, a gift basket, and the manila folder. Go crazy. I can always tell by the look on my dad's face when he comes back if the family took the committee seriously or if we're getting new neighbors again very soon. Not long ago, a family moved in directly next to us. The previous owner, Miss Maddie, passed away at the age of 105. She lived a good long life. Our new neighbors seemed like they fit in just fine. They believed the welcoming committee, took my dad's advice about locking shutters since they had a young child of their own. Whatever newspaper clippings were in that manila envelope, whatever evidence, my dad never let us see. But I imagine it must be something awfully convincing, since our neighbors got along with no issues for the first month. One night, when our new neighbors had to leave town, they sent their son, Holden, to stay with us. He was 12, a year under me in school. I didn't know him well before that night, but as soon as his parents dropped him off after dinner, I could tell it was going to be a bad time. Do you know who's always out there whistling every night? Holden asked the moment the adults left the room. The three of us were sitting in the den, some Disney movie playing idly on the television. My sister and I exchanged a glance. We don't talk about that, I said. I think it's that weirdo that lives in the big yellow house on the corner, Holden said. Mr. Tolles? My sister asked. No way, he's really nice. Holden shrugged. Must be a psycho killer then. Nola tensed. We don't talk about it, I repeated. Let's go to my room and play Nintendo. We spent the next few hours playing games, eating popcorn, and watching movies. A typical sleepover, but I could see Holden was getting antsy. After my parents had wished us a good night, locked the blinds, and gone to bed, Holden stood up from his beanbag and walked over to where Nola and I were sitting on my bed. Have you ever even tried looking? He asked. It's nearly time. Like most sleepovers, we'd conveniently ignored any suggestion of a bedtime. I was shocked to see that he was right. It was almost 3 a.m. I sighed. We don't... See, I can't even try to look because my dad locks the blinds every night and hides the key, he continues, ignoring me. So does our dad, says Nola. No. replied Holden. No, he doesn't. You saw him do it, I said, a little sharper than I meant to sound. Holden grinned. Your dad locks the blinds, yeah, but he doesn't hide the key. He keeps it right on his normal keychain. So? I asked, worried that I already knew what he was going to say next. I had noticed that my dad didn't bother hiding the key anymore after all of these years, because he knew we took it seriously. So after your dad locked up, but before your parents went to bed, I went to the bathroom. And on my way, I may have peeked into the room, and I may have seen your dad's keychain on his nightstand, and I maybe went and borrowed the key to the blinds. Noah and I stared at his grin only grew wider. You're lying, I said. Holden shrugged. You can check if you want. Just open your parents' door and look. You'll see his keychain right there on the nightstand. Stay here, I told both of them. Don't move a muscle. Hi, Nebu. I hurried over to my parents' room and hesitated at the door. If Holden wasn't lying, my dad would be angry. Beyond angry. I was scared thinking about it, but the more scared of an open window with a whistler right outside. I opened the door, barely an inch, and looked in it, but it was too dark to see. Taking a deep breath, I walked into the room. 2 steps into the dark, I froze. The whistling started, and I could hear it clearly from my parents' room. I never realized, but they must have heard the sound every night since we moved into the house. They never told us. I don't think I could have slept through it. I stood there listening to the whistling come closer, unsure whether I should turn on a light or call out for my dad. Soft sounds from the living room brought me back to reality. Noah! I yelled, running out of my parents' room. Holden and Noah were standing near the front door next to a window. Holden wasn't lying. I could see him fumbling with the lock on one of the blinds. I heard a click. He did have the key. Holden let out a quick laugh. Noah stood next to him, hunched up, afraid but maybe curious. The whistling was right outside our house now. I think I made a sound, called out. I can't remember. Time felt frozen, clock hands nailed to the face. But I found myself moving. I'm not fast. I've never been athletic. Somehow, though, I covered the space between myself and Nola in a moment. My eyes were locked on her, but I heard Holden pull up the blind all the way down so it could release. I heard the snap of it start to raise, and I heard the whistling just on the other side of the window. But I had my arms around Nola, and I turned us so she would be facing away from the window. At the same time, I jammed my eyes shut. The blind whipped open. The whistling stopped. I felt Nola shaking in my arms. Don't look, okay? I told her. Don't turn around. We were positioned so that she was facing back towards the hallway, and I was facing the window. My eyes were still closed. I felt her nod into my shoulder. I reached out with the arm not holding Nola and tried to touch Holden. My hand brushed against his arm. He was shaking worse than Nola. Holden? I asked. Silence. I reached past him and gingerly felt for the window, eyes still sealed shut. The glass was cold against my fingertips, colder than it should have been for the time of year. I moved my hand up the window, searching for the string to the blind. The glass began to get warmer the further I reached up, and there was a gentle hum feeding back into my fingertips. I tried not to think about what might be on the other side of the window. Finally, I touched the string and yanked the blind shut. I opened my eyes. In the dim light leaking out from the kitchen, I could make out Holden, pale and small, staring at the now closed window. Holden? I asked again. He turned towards me and he screamed. Everything became a flurry of motion. Lights sparked to life in the hall, then in the living room. My parents' footsteps thudded across the hardwood floor. I didn't turn to look back at them. My eyes were glued to Holden. He was pale. Had bit his lips so hard that there was a thin red line of blood running down his chin, and he'd wet himself. What happened? My dad asked from behind me. I managed to swivel away from Holden and look back. He looked... I'd never seen my dad scared before, but I saw it that night. In that moment, an old, ugly terror stitched onto his face. A parent's fear. Just Holden? He mouthed to me. I nodded yes. My dad let out a breath. He looked so relieved I nearly expected him to cheer. But then he turned to Holden and my dad's face changed. I wondered if he felt bad for feeling good that Holden was the only one that looked. There was a knock at the door. We all froze. Holden whimpered. Don't answer it, my mom said. She stood at the threshold of the hall. I'd always thought she was a skeptic and just humored my dad about the windows and the whistler, but that night we were all believers. I noticed that both my parents held baseball bats that they must have taken from their bedroom. The knock came again, a little louder this time. Please, don't open the door, Holden whimpered. My dad walked over to him, hugged him close. We won't, my dad promised, still holding the bat. Nothing is coming in here tonight. This time the knocking was loud enough to rattle the door. Holden screamed again and Nola clutched her arms around my neck. My mom came over and knelt down next to us, wrapping my sister and me close. Call the police, my mom whispered to my dad. The knocking instantly stopped. My dad looked over his shoulder at us. Do you think? He's caught off by frantic knocking that trailed off to a polite police, something said from the other side of the door. The voice from outside sounded exactly like my mom, like a parrot repeating the words back to her. Police. Call. The police. Police. My mom pulled us closer. Police. 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 Please stop, I heard her whisper. I don't think calling them will help, my dad said. How will we know when they're the ones at the door? The knocking came back harder than before. The door shook. Then it stopped. After a long moment, I heard the knocking again, but it was coming from our back door. We all turned together towards the back door, but the knocking immediately returned to the front door, front to back to front, loud, then quiet, then loud again. Suddenly, the sound was coming from both doors at once, big, heavy blows like a sledgehammer. And something started rapping against all the windows in the house, and all the walls. It was like we were living inside a drum, with a dozen people trying to play it at once. Or we were a turtle, and something was attempting to claw us out of our shell. Stop, Holden yelled. The knocking died. I won't tell, Holden said, staring at the door. I promise I won't tell anyone what I saw. Just please go away. We waited for nearly a minute. Then we heard it. A soft tap, tap, tapping, coming from the window Holden had looked at through earlier. Holden started to cry, sobbing like a prisoner watching gallows being built outside their cell. My dad held him, brushed his hair, but never lied to him, never told him things would be okay. The tapping at the window went on for the rest of the night. Oh, thanks, phone. We huddled together in the living room for I don't know how long. Eventually, my mom tried to take us kids into my room, while my dad stayed to watch the door. But the second we moved into my bedroom, the knocking came back so loud it was impossible to ignore. I was afraid the door couldn't take it. We went back to the living room and the knocking stopped. Only the tap, tap, tap on the window remained. None of us slept that night. The tapping stopped around 7 a.m. That's about the time the sun comes up here. We waited another 2 hours before my dad opened the blinds from one window. He made us all go back to my parents' bedroom first. I heard him open the door and then come back in. Okay, he told us. It is done. Holden's parents came back around lunchtime. My mom and dad walked Holden over to his house and they all went inside for quite a while. Nola and I watched from the window. She stuck to me the whole day, right at my side, sometimes holding my hand. When my parents came back, they looked grim, but wouldn't tell us what they said to Holden's family. It was a Sunday, so we all spent the day together, ordered pizza, and watched movies. That night, everyone slept in my room. Nola and my mom in the bed with me, my dad in a chair he'd pulled over. There was no knocking that night, or any night since. We didn't see much of Holden or his parents for the rest of the week, but by Thursday, there was a moving truck in the driveway. Nola and I watched them packing up the whole afternoon after school. What sticks with me most is how tired Holden and his parents looked. All three had the same pallor, grim mouths and lightless eyes. Even from across the street, I could tell something was very wrong. Holden and his family were gone before sunset. I remember that original welcoming committee said to my parents when we moved in, "Not everyone who looks at the Whistler dies, but even those that live had the light go out of them. and the rest of their lives are full of misfortune, a million little tragedies. I think Holden's parents must have looked, either to comfort him if they didn't believe, or share the burden if they did. I watched Nola some days, happy and young and alive, and I wonder if I'd been slower. If she had looked out the window that night, would I have looked too? To comfort her? To share the burden? I'm glad I didn't have to find out. We still live in that house, in that neighborhood. We still hear our whistler walking past every night. The blessings, the luck, the good things here are too good to leave. But we're careful. We don't have friends over to spend the night anymore. My dad hides the key to the blinds very, very well. Not that I've gone looking. Some things you just don't need to look for. And that is the end of our story. Something walks whistling past my house every night. What did everyone think? I think that one was actually really good. Very immersive. It's actually one most immersive story in 2019. Scariest story. So good on you. Good on you, author. I think it was very well credited. Very well worth it. Gonna hold a little bit of a vote. Like that the done. They don't really reveal what the thing is. Yeah, it's still a mystery thing. We don't know what it looks like. We don't know what it is. Hope you like the immersive knocking. Or attempted knocking. Okay. Made me jump, thanks. I'm sorry. You did sign up for Spoopy Time, so it only makes sense. Alright. Oh, this is formatted differently. Interesting. Okay. Oh. There's pictures involved with this one. Ooh, okay. Wait. I'm actually excited for that. This one seems like another short story. Okay, so we have The Demon at the Window, or The House with 100 Doors, but that one has 6 parts, so it's quite a lot longer. Which one would you guys prefer? And as you debate over that, I'm gonna have some water and a snack. I had recently gone through my little snack bin to clean out anything that I haven't really eaten. And I found a box of Pocky, cookies and cream flavored, and it quote unquote expired July 24th, which is 4 days ago. But it was never open, like it was completely sealed. So they're probably fine, right? It's definitely fine, right? Uh-oh, did we die again? Oh, okay. Alright, I'm gonna do a coin flip. We're gonna do technically like even and odd. We're gonna do evens for... Oh, ripped my pocket. No, it's fine. It's probably fine. We're gonna do evens for demon and odds for 100 doors. It is Nice, evens. So demon is next. Yes, I do have D&D dice readily available on my desk. Where is it? Is that where it is? Sorry. One of his other short stories is just called, in all caps, "Fuck Spiders." Which I think is kind of funny. Okay. Got it. Alright, The Demon at the Window. All of these are by Travis Brown. These are all by the same author. Just to specify that. Our little synopsis for this story, which is actually quite nice. As war descends across the globe, a small Cape Cod town falls into hysteria over a mysterious figure tormenting residents. With the town's children at risk, a group of young, quote, devil hunters rise to action. A 23-minute read. That's probably gonna be longer because I'm speaking out loud. The Demon at the Window. At 14 years old, Joey Jannard could look back and remember being younger and cat-curious, watching the fire at the school while the flames were still flickering and black coils of smoke poured up into the sky. The police could issue denials until they ran out of breath, but there had been too many eyewitnesses, too many unexplained encounters, and now the fires. The so-called Devil of the Dunes was here. 4 homes burned. Then the high school went up like a gasoline-soaked candle. Joey stopped his bike and stood in the crowd watching the fire chief Julian Lewis and his men attempt to settle the blaze. The sun was just cooling below the horizon, but the fire kept the area around the building bright as cloudless noon. Shadows stretched from the school's playground into the woods. They moved in rhythm with the flames as they jumped, jittered, and crashed. All except for one shadow. It stood frozen at a tree line, tall and sharp. Even though there was a school on fire 40 yards away, Joey found himself staring at the shadow. It moved slowly and deliberately until Joey was certain it was watching him back. In the time it took Joey to blink, the shape disappeared into the forest. The school survived the fire, but the event took a toll on the parents in the town. If the devil was targeting schools, then children were in danger. Many hoped the fire would be an isolated incident, perhaps an unrelated accident, but it wasn't long before the creature was sent to begin stalking students. Joy lived at 34 Standish Street in the heart of Provincetown, Massachusetts, at the far tip of the Massachusetts peninsula of Cape Cod. It was a postcard of a town, an orderly spread of peach roofs and clean streets that rippled gently towards the ocean. P-Town, as the locals call it, was quiet most of the year. A line of lighthouses stood sentry at the shoreline, red-painted reminders of the storms that sometimes hurled ships to break against the coast. Along with his 3 younger siblings, Lewis, a year younger than Joey, Ellen, 2 years younger, and Eleanor, 3 years younger, Joey spent his childhood on the shore under the high and soft New England sun. He prayed for that same sun to rise early on nights when he thought the devil might be outside. Like all the kids in town, Joey was well versed in the stories surrounding the Devil of the Dunes, a name guaranteed to stir up the darkest fears of the Cape's old New England Puritans and superstitious Portuguese fishing community alike. Oddly specific, but okay. The creature, also called the Phantom Flash or the Black Flash, was said to be a ghost-like being who stalked and attacked people in the dark. It could also move and jump at inhuman speeds and heights. Joey and his siblings traded rumors with friends like baseball cards. Early stories of the Devil of the Dunes began to truly catch hold in the Provincetown in the fall of 1938. Katie Dos Passos, wife of the Lost Generation era novelist John Dos Passos, characterized the mysterious figure as a, quote, prowler, writing to a friend at the time that, quote, a mysterious stranger appears at windows after midnight, said to wear a black cape and jumps over hedges. The Dos Passos housekeeper cried, he's a great leaper. While the sightings were peculiar, they didn't seem dangerous, at least at first. The town had a lot on its mind already that year. One of the deadliest weather events in modern history, the Great New England Hurricane, had just battered Cape Cod. The storm sank ships, cracked homes, and claimed an estimated 700 lives. Overseas, Schindler's shadow lay across Europe. Germany's neighbors were terrified that the war machine could begin to grind across the continent. Americans had mixed feelings about getting involved, and should conflict erupt so far from home. But many worried that whatever happened in Europe would bleed across the globe. With so many troubles, both near and far, it was easy for most of the P-Town to ignore reports of a monster walking the streets at night. But as dismissive of the stories as the adults might have been, Joey became fixated on the creature. He collected accounts of the Devil of the Dunes, a morbid scrapbook filled with newspaper clippings, fan art, and rumors written down like journal entries. The stories came in from all corners, whispered in the schoolyard, and overheard conversations between adults. For Joey, the Devil of the Dunes became a fixation. It was both an adventure and an escape from the shadow cast by 1938. The massive hurricane had shaken the town and shown that the safety of the shore was a fragile thing. Even more troubling for the Jannard family was the threat of war in Europe. Joey's father served in the Coast Guard. If America sent out soldiers to defend their allies, the Jannards would have a personal stake in the fight, so Joey looked for any distraction that he could gather. Since the town's adults refused to take action, Joey and his brothers started a group that quickly grew to 40 members, scouring the town that night, searching for the devil. When the sun went down, the boys, an informal junior town watch, could be found hiding behind trees and peeking from alleyways. No doubt, like kids everywhere, they would have debated a name for the group, though none could be more appropriate than the Devil Hunters. Joey's favorite area to patrol was the playground. He'd stalk through the swings, crouch under the slide, and watch the tree line behind the school with binoculars he borrowed from his father. But for all of their efforts, the devil eluded the group, and Joey had nothing more to show than a growing scrapbook filled with reports of sightings, encounters, and attacks. As time passed, Joey collected more and more accounts of the Devil of the Dunes, picking, prodding, and examining the gossip. Joey wondered what he'd do if it ever came face to face with the devil. He had no way of knowing what he would find. He would soon find out when his family became involved in the most disturbing encounter on October 26, 1939. The Provincetown Advocate ran a front-page story titled, "Fall brings out the Devil of the Dunes. Hard winter certain as cabin fever stories start." It ain't usually until cabin fever time that the balmy stories start. After folks have been penned up here for too long a time, in too little space, with just the same faces to look at every morning, afternoon, and evening, then the crazy yarns begin circulating. But winter seems to be shutting in early this year. Here it is only October, and the Black Flash, aka Devil of the Dunes, has been prowling, scaring kids so that they won't go out at night and won't go to bed, grabbing women, jumping over 10-foot hedges with no trouble at all. Chair springs on his feet is the explanation. According to Police Chief Anthony Tarvers, mental fever may have pushed the local young men into nervous pranks, donning capes and helmets, and venting their own unease by trying to scare their neighbors. Tarvers was an imposing figure, tall and clean-cut. He became chief of Provincetown Police in 1939. The son of immigrants from the Azores region of Portugal, Tarvers was terse but well regarded and respected. Broad-shouldered with a square jaw and dark eyes, Tarvers could stop even the notoriously rowdy Cape Cod fishermen with a hard look. In spite of an intimidating outward appearance, Chief Tarvers was generally viewed, alongside his wife Molly, as kind and sociable. On the matter of the devil, Tarvers was never open to debate. there were ever such a thing as the Devil of the Dunes, it was nothing more than just a prank, and it was one of the best ignored, less attention bring to the Joker's back. As far as I'm concerned, the Devil of the Dunes is dead and gone, he told the Provincetown Advocate. Chief Tarver's 4 children were schoolmates of the Jannards. For the father for whom the devil had become an increasingly annoying rumor, it's not surprising that if the children did participate in the club of junior patrollers, they never specifically named in public accounts. I like hearing that there's like a newspaper clipping. There's like pictures in the story, which is really neat. There's like a newspaper clipping here. 4th fire sale on Cape Cod. Provincetown, something slinking, sinister night prowler, the Black Flash, tonight was being sought by 40 boys of something that got cut off. To watch every night. Articles about the devil shared space with updates on the fighting over in Europe. As the war erupted, restless anxiety infected Provincetown. This apprehension, with the police-friendly Provincetown Advocate labeled cabin fever, caused residents to walk home a little faster after dark and to stare at strangers a little longer than was polite. However, others in Provincetown believe that the area's anxiety over the trouble in Europe had a rotten core. Fear is a beacon, a signal flare that can attract all manner of malicious, hungry things. As the war raged across the ocean, residents in Provincetown were about to find themselves under siege, not from a foreign adversary, but from a local force. Joey had learned lots of things from his father, Joseph. Beyond passing down a name, Joseph Jannard gave his oldest son several gifts: a clever mind, a tactical eye, and a bone-deep persistence. It wasn't long before Joey led the town's youth patrol. He helped the group plan their nightly routes, poring over the street maps looking for the likeliest places for the Devil of the Dunes to strike. The creature had a preference for ambushing people while they were alone and far from help. The devil hunters focused on isolated buildings and empty streets, stretches of forest and shoreline, back alleys and farms. Joy drew lines in red, marking the sites of previous sightings, searching for a pattern. In so many ways, Joey's and their friends were playing at war at the same time their fathers and brothers were preparing for the genuine article. There was a gnawing fear in Joey, a concern that his father would soon be called up for duty far from home. At home, his dad was brave, resolute, and ready. Joey couldn't control the war overseas, but he could have an impact at home. He and his friends would wage their own battle against a local monster. Even if they didn't win, Joey at least wanted to face the night and the devil of the dunes with the same courage his father showed him every day. Bravery was one other gift that Joey hoped was a Jannard legacy. He and the patrol planned, searched, and tracked the devil. However, wars, even small wars between children and monsters, require more than timing to corner the devil of the dunes. The kids missed their timing on the night the Phantom attacked the Farleys. Charles Farley woke up in his study to the sound of a scream. He tumbled out of his chair, sprinting into the kitchen. His wife was frozen, pale, staring out the window above the sink. There was nothing there, only empty night on the other side. He ran to his wife, asking her what's wrong. She told him that she saw a face looking in at her while she was doing the dishes. It was bone white and staring down at her, the face of a tall thing kept out only by a thin sheet of glass. The face was horrible, according to his wife, hateful. Charles was dismissive, insisting that his wife only had caught a sight of her own reflection. However, he promised to check the yard to ease her mind. He brought a shotgun and a light from the hall and headed outside into the autumn evening. The air already had a winter cut to it, especially after dark. Charles saw plumes of his hot breath escaping from the path of his flashlight, but not much else. The backyard was shadow swallowed, no moon in sight. The cloud cover would break soon after, but for the moment, Provincetown was dark. Charles's beam sliced in the dark from tree to shed to, finally, the wooden line of the property's old fence. That's when Charles stopped. There was a figure. tall and slightly bent, standing next to the barrier. Mr. Farley called out a warning once, then again. Whatever it was in his yard, it didn't respond. It began to advance towards the house. Charles fired off a warning shot, high and wide. He heard the creature laugh. Then it came on faster. Mr. Farley aimed his remaining barrel center mass. Later, Farley would tell the police that the shot had no effect, and that the shape in his backyard simply laughed and leapt away over the fence. One moment there was a shadow, and then the next an absence. When Charles returned to the kitchen, his wife was deeply shaken. She asked him about the shots. It's unknown whether he told his wife the details of the encounter with the Devil of the Dunes at the time. He was acutely aware of how crazy it sounded. Some cackling shadow thing moved faster than the eye could follow. Maybe he claimed he'd fired upon a wild animal and scared it off. Mrs. Farley went to bed, but not before making Charles promise to close all of the curtains. He did, suppressing a small tinge of alarm every time he approached a window. At no point did he see any faces other than his own reflection, but the discomfort lingered even after he followed his wife to bed. Closing the curtains before bed became a nightly ritual for Charles, one adopted by most of the town during these years. Charles shared his account with the police, undoubtedly infuriating Chief Tarvers, who, as a loyal public servant, was still obligated to take the report. But Charles also went to the press, seeming to kickstart a new phase of awareness. Soon the devil became a nightly terror of the residents of Provincetown. Shortly after the Farley incident, Maria Costa, a Provincetown local, found herself face to face with the Devil of the Dunes as she was walking home from visiting a neighbor in the early evening. It was cold that night, and Maria was shivering in her jacket, kicking herself for not bringing a scarf or gloves. It was still autumn, but winter was knocking. Wind plucked leaves from the fading trees and pushed them down narrow street past Maria. Walking from her neighbor was a short one. Maria was nearly home when she heard a buzzing as she passed a long hedgerow. She stopped. A shadow unfolded itself from behind the hedges until it towered over Maria. The thing growled. It wore all black, and, according to Maria, stood at least 8 feet tall. She reported seeing pointed ears offsetting a deformed face. Eyes like burning houses stared down at her. Maria ran. The Devil of the Dunes, from what she could tell, didn't follow. Maria filed a report with the police the next morning. One can easily imagine Chief Tarver's reaction, just as one can imagine how his aggravation must have grown as her account became just one of dozens of other now flooding in the town. The Devil of the Dunes sightings were happening weekly, then near daily, and the entity continued to become more and more hostile. The stories swirled around the town, told in bars over the tops of shot glasses, whispered between kids who kept a nervous watch out their windows. Locals wrote it to friends and family about a midnight prowler, a terrible face that liked to peer in from the dark. Closing the curtains might fend off prying eyes, but every time a branch or a bird touched the glass, the janitors would immediately go silent, waiting. Joey added Maria's story to his journal, which had become a casebook. The pages were filling quickly. Joey's younger siblings were terrified that the devil would come tapping some night on their window. The 4 siblings sat together in the dark, passing around a flashlight and reading the journal in small hours after the parents went to sleep. They'd pile the blankets and pillows together into a fort in the room Joey shared with his younger brother Lewis. Alan and Eleanor would share snacks pilfered from the kitchen. Deep into the night and early morning, the siblings would gossip about their most recent attacks, casting furtive glances at their windows until the youngest, Eleanor, got too scared and had to go to bed. Joey swore to himself the Provincetown devil would never hurt the janitors without a fight. As American troops continued to be called up and sent overseas, Provincetown lost more and more young men to the war. The country experienced a wave of rationing, grief, and paranoia. Life for Joey and the other New England children became a revolving door of school, safety drills, work, waiting, sneaking news from parents, waiting, watching the shoreline, waiting. The stories of the Devil of the Dunes grew in parallel to the war, but Joey found stranger and stranger details in each new rumor. Then the devil began starting the fires. That was the rumor, at least, thought, though the fire chief Julian Lewis issued denials similar to those from the police chief Tarvers. But while Lewis, well into his 70s, did not have his own children in the school, he was a protective father with his middle-aged daughter still living at home with him and his wife. So it must have been no less disturbing for him to watch the school burn. Attacks against adults out late was one thing, but the devil had begun turning his attention to younger prey, those who had most aggressively tried to catch him. Reports circulated throughout the town about a boy being attacked by the creature. He was returning home from the library when he was chased by a figure in black, spitting blue flames. He ran all the way to the police station. His pursuer vanished. Hi, Pixel. Clinging to the idea that teenage pranksters were behind the devil's sightings, the police did not give this account much credence. A tall figure that could breathe fire sounded like a fairy tale dreamed up by restless kids, maybe the same ones hunting the supposed creature. Joey had also heard the rumors that a group of teens shared the Devil in the Dunes identity, using multiple costumes to appear as if they were able to move across Provincetown instantaneously. However, the opinion of the police and the public shifted as additional reports rolled in, including a confrontation between a team of cops and the Devil of the Dunes. The prankster explanation could hardly account for the figure's ability to leap over fences and move at impossible speeds. Plus, the idea of a network of coordinated pranksters was far-fetched to say the least. While Chief Tarvers maintained that the creature was human, his officers were less convinced. Tarvers was a lean man, practical and efficient. His police force was equally lean, numbering only 8 members total, including the chief. Not long after the anonymous report of the teen attacked on his way home from the library, 4 of Provincetown's officers responded to a call. Witnesses saw a man, or at least a man-shaped figure, prowling along the elementary school's playground one night, the same school that Joey, his siblings, and Chief Tarver's children attended. The night of the playground incident, officers approached the schoolyard with flashlights drawn. Silhouettes of slides, swings, and trees blended together like black cracks in new ice. Officers saw a shadow that was not like the rest, tall and lanky, moving across the yard. One of the officers demanded the figure identify itself. It ignored the command. 4 sworn officers, half of Provincetown's police force, responding to a suspicious person call would be an overkill in most situations. But the devil had everyone on edge, especially as it had seemingly zeroed in on the community's children. When the shadow in the playground began to advance towards the men, they didn't hesitate. All 4 police officers drew their service revolvers. They couldn't afford to scoff now. The order to halt was given by the most senior officer. The devil reportedly kept moving. The beams of the men's flashlight failed to reveal what was behind the shadow. It was a living, moving being, and it was approaching fast. That was the moment where the officers paused. As unsettling as the experience must have been, their chief and many prominent members of the town maintained that the Devil of the Dunes was a prank. Kids in a costume. However improbable that seemed if they fired and found out that the monster was only a teenager with a sick sense of humor. Perhaps sensing their indecision, the figure laughed, then darted back into the playground. Before the officers could pursue, the Devil of the Dunes lived up to its name, crawling over the playground's tall fence so quickly it vanished into thin air. Officers were not able to find any trace or trail of the creature. Joey, his friends, and siblings all would have heard the confrontation between police and the devil in the school's playground. There was an awful intimacy to the encounter, an invasion of privacy. It's one thing to have a monster standing outside your window, but the devil had slipped inside. The children now watched the playground with suspicion during the day, expecting to see a leering face with the skin stretched too tight across its skull bearing back at them. Or they looked for the razor shine of silver from some dark corner, since at least one officer claimed that the devil's face appeared to be metallic. Carver's never publicly changed his stance that the Devil of the Dunes was a gruesome prank, but soon he stepped down as police chief. He was replaced by John Rigo, one of the officers at the time of the playground incident, who was much more inclined to believe that the inexplicable movements of the devil could not be explained by teenage pranks. In replacing Tarvers, it seemed as though the town had spoken. Nearly every night, local pool sharks 8-Ball Eddie made the rounds of Provincetown's smoky pubs, drinking and gambling his way through the regulars. A small guy with a chip the size of Plymouth Rock on his shoulder, Eddie was a hustler, a con man, a card sharp, and a gambler. The only thing faster in his hands was his mouth, and he was about as humble as a Main Street parade. He'd brag about anything when he was drunk, which was often. As rumors of the devil began to dominate barroom discussion, Eddie told anybody who would listen that he thought the whole tale was bullshit. If I ever run into that son of a bitch, Eddie would mutter while lining up his shot, I'll sort him. I'll let that bastard jump out and say boo. I'll break my cue over his head. Let me run into him. Let him run into me. But even as the local children began coming home from playing outside well before dark, the parents drew the curtains after sundown as the town prepared for the new siege every night, and the devil hunters exhausted themselves on patrol. 8-Ball Eddie continued to refuse to take the Devil of the Dunes seriously. He certainly didn't need any kids to try to protect him from the Phantom. Eddie's theory was that the devil was a very large man wearing a black dress who got his kicks spooking the locals. At every possible occasion, Eddie would mock the so-called creature and the fear it spread across Provincetown. He called the creature slurs, made threats, and bragged about what would happen if he ever ran into the Devil of the Dunes. Eddie would take long walks after the bar and pool halls closed at night. On one such outing, he noticed a shadow following slowly in his wake, like a shark gliding behind a boat. Given his reputation as a hustler, Eddie's first thought was probably he was being stalked by another pool player, somebody looking to get even after an ugly game. Eddie stopped and turned to confront the figure. Finally getting a clear look at the thing, he was startled. Eddie found himself face to face with the Devil of the Dunes, or face to stomach, given the reported height of the creature. Before Eddie could say a word, the shadow slapped him, hard. Again and again, the creature struck the pool shark, laughing its buzzing laugh, but never speaking. Bruised and humiliated, Eddie was able to escape, sprinting the rest of the way home without looking back. While the hustler got away, the event apparently left him shaken and nervous. 8-Ball Eddie claimed that the Devil of the Dunes was dressed in a thick hood and cloak, with burning silver eyes, but human. Whether the devil was flesh and blood or something stranger, Eddie didn't mock it again after his encounter. The account filtered through Provincetown's bars and watering holes until it was common knowledge. The story was supported by Eddie's swollen bruise of a face and uncharacteristic silence. Joey added the run-in between the pool shark and the devil to his journal. It was followed by a string of similar assaults. Instead of jumping out of hedgerows and startling people, the devil had graduated to physical attacks. It was like a wild animal that had acquired a taste for violence. Joey would track the escalation. In many ways, it seemed to match the increasing bloodshed overseas. The uglier the world became, the nastier the Phantom got. The police continued responding to calls and taking reports, likely with more attention under the new leadership. Joey and the other boys in town diligently kept up their informal watch, even as it seemed the devil would never be caught. Provincetown was a lonelier, quieter place as the war came to a close. While the United States was spared many of the horrors seen by Europe and the Pacific, towns all across the country were decimated by the loss of so many soldiers. Though the Devil of the Dunes still appeared at night, sightings seemed to be drying up. Maybe the devil, whatever it was, had moved on, or, worse, lay in wait for his ultimate strike. One afternoon, while their mother was out working, Joey and his 3 younger siblings were playing in their yard on Standish Street. Fog covered Provincetown like a cloud shot down to earth. The sunlight was strained as it came through the mist, giving the afternoon a washed-out quality. Still, it was daylight, and sightings of the Devil of the Dunes while the sun was out was still rare. The devil hunters could find reason to relax with the sightings trailing off, but Joey would never quite stand down. If he had to be the last line of defense for the moment, so be it. Still, with the war and their demonic nemesis fading, maybe it was time to be a kid again. It came as a bone-sick shock when Joey spotted the devil at the edge of the yard. The creature was moving towards the janitor slowly, a predator stalking through the fog, hunched against the gray, greasy sunlight. Joey's world froze. All the night spent combing through the town with his friends, flashlight beams bouncing through the dark. All of the stories and sightings and attacks carefully collected. Every hour spent preparing to face the horror. All of that for nothing. Joey was rooted to the spot. He wished his dad was there, standing between him and his gaunt, crooked thing. But Joseph Janet was still deployed, far from home. So far. The devil was quietly walking, and carefully, until it was spotted. When it noticed the janitor children staring, it dropped to all fours and sprinted towards them. And it was fast. Joey remained frozen, but when he saw the creature's face, its hateful eyes, that was enough to make him move. The thing, whatever it was, would not hurt his family. At last, the devil that Joey had pursued so obsessively had come for him. A grueling, drawn-out war came to a final battle. And like so many of the town residents before him, Joey found himself facing an enemy as evil as it was unbeatable. Joey managed to pull his terrified siblings into their home, slamming the door with the devil of the dunes only steps away. There are no reports of the creature trying to break into a home previously, but that day, seconds after Joey turned the lock, the devil tried the knob. The janitors were alone with the demon at the door. As the devil attempted to force his way through the front door, Joey and his siblings rushed through their home, securing doors and windows only moments ahead of time of the creature. Somehow, the entity seemed able to attack multiple entries at once, rattling doorknobs, pounding on the walls, scratching on the windows. While Alan, Joey's 12-year-old brother, took the two youngest to hide under their parents' bed, Joey had to stand tall. Crashing, thumping, clawing, the devil of the dunes was moments away from breaking in. To Joey, the attack felt like a manifestation of all the anxiety from the past several years. Ever since the hurricane ripped houses out of Provincetown like rotten teeth, Joey felt a shadow hanging over his world. The war, his father shipping away, the rumors of the devil of the dunes, now was focused onto one singular terror that was currently trying to break down the door. There wasn't anything Joey could do about the storms that racked the coast or the hard men who shot and killed each other in battle for reasons no child would understand. He couldn't bring his father home, but there was one thing Joey could do at that moment to protect his family. He turned on the oven and began to boil a pot of water. It only took a few minutes, but with all of the pounding and scratching against his house, it felt like years. Once it was finished, he went upstairs, creeping from room to room, looking down from the windows. Thick fog made it difficult to find the creature, but Joey was patient. He opened the window and poured the boiling water down. The devil of the dunes reportedly shrieked when the water hit, then it crawled away into the mist. There were no documentation sightings of the devil of the dunes in Provincetown after Joey's triumph. After that winter, the devil, whatever each resident believed it had been, apparently slunk away, perhaps to the dunes, and life in the town returned to a new normal. The entity was gone, and the war was over, but the marks from both remained. Many of the young men who left Provincetown to fight never made it back home. Those who did carried the memories of violence with them. Provincetown did its best to forget. The devil of the dunes of Provincetown shares many similarities with stories of other almost human creatures from across the globe, with England's spring-heeled Jack being the most famous. Like the devil, Jack was often described as demonic in appearance, with burning eyes, wrapped in all black. Both creatures have been called phantoms, demons, or even extraterrestrials. Stranger still are reports of Perak, the springman of Prague. Like the devil of the dunes, Perak was first spotted in 1939, with its last sighting in 1945. While the devil roamed New England, Perak was said to haunt Czechoslovakia during the World War II occupation. leaping impossible heights, startling and slashing at residents of Prague with razor blades at night. The timelines match up almost exactly between Perak and the Devil of the Dunes, as do the descriptions from witnesses. In Mattoon, Illinois, just over 1,000 miles away from Provincetown, there were reports of a man or creature dressed in all black terrorizing the town in the summer of 1944. The mad gasser of Mattoon was described as a tall, thin thing and was accused of several chemical attacks against residents of the town over a period of 2 weeks. Some families to this day still close their curtains at sundown in Provincetown. If you look out to New England nights, there's no telling what might look back. That is the demon at the window. I think this one was actually pretty interesting too, the way that it sort of read like a news report. The Dooner right now. Dooner ain't happy. I like that this read sort of like a news report. Like part news report, part like third party like encounter. It was very interesting. And I do like that the nuance of every time that the devil was reported, they were mostly similar, but there were some things that were not quite clear. Like some incidents reported like, yes, he was wearing all black, but it was maybe a cloak or a dress or just like clothing in general, or the eyes. I don't know what's going on, but worship the worm. I like the description that it was consistent but inconsistent, that everyone saw it slightly differently, like the eyes that were burning. They were either like red burning like the sunset, or silver, or he had a silver face. Things that were semi-consistent, but because of the panic and how people viewed this devil, it always looked a little bit different. Yeah, the Dooner, unironically. With the big ol' eyes. Alright. We got one more. This one is very long. Very, very long. The House with 100 Doors. And it has 6 parts. So I'm gonna take a swig of water really quick. Miko-chan, thank you for the follow. Welcome in. The Dooner has several alt accounts. That's the thing too. People thought they were like pranksters, but obviously by the description at some point that it was very clear that it couldn't have been human. But it was unclear of what exactly it was because you only saw it for a little bit. You didn't ever see it for too long before it disappeared. I'm liking this author's work. It has a nice little bit of unsure entity, but it's always consistent. Same details, but you never really know what the thing is or what it looks like. Alright. The freakster's gonna visit me if I don't wash behind the ears. Oh no! And the whistler's gonna look at you if you look out the window at 3:03 a.m. and you hear whistling. Oh, before I start this one, the last time I did a reading, I had found a story about the like local cryptid, and I had found it apparently like the day that it came out. There hasn't been a part 3, which makes me really sad because I was really hoping that there might be one because the way that it got set up. But unfortunately not. There is no part 3 to let me tell you about the cryptid in our town, or what, some variant name of that. I thought that one had potential. Maybe in the future. Oh, the freaks there. Local crypto. Crypto. We don't support NFTs here. Thank you. No cryptos. No NFTs. Okay. I want to make sure that I'm holding these. Why is that here twice? Oops. I want to make sure I'm holding the website so that I can put them in the description later. Oh. Nope, that wasn't it. Ichi. Here. Oh. Why do I feel out of breath? I'll steal your nickels from the dryer. No! Those are my nickels from my dryer. I need those. The local cryptid? You mean the drunk that stands outside my local Mexican food place asking for money for food but then goes spends it on alcohol at the nearby bar? Does that technically count as a cryptid? Is that really a cryptid or just like a drunkard? Who knows? Alright. This is not the story that I need. There it is. I need this story. I had accidentally pulled out the whistler again. I'll go ask next time. Just be careful. Bring some claws with you, just in case. Alright, this is a series. Again, this has 6 parts, so this will definitely be longer. This is The House with 100 Doors, Part 1 by Grand Theft Auto / Travis Brown. After the first door, the next room is always random. I've never seen any rhyme or reason to it, but there are certain consistencies to watch out for as we go. Bathrooms and kitchens are usually safe. The attic is bad, the basement is worse. Bedrooms are okay if they're empty, not so much if they're occupied. And if you open a door and the room on the other side has yellow walls, slam the fucking door shut. Any questions? Every hand in the parlor went up. Yeah, said our host. I had a hunch there would be some questions. Another door! There were 5 of us sitting in the large plush room. Our host, Doc, went through a lot of trouble recreating an authentic English drawing room in what was, from the outside, a cookie-cutter American McMansion built too big for its neighborhood. The place wasn't huge, but it rose above the rest of the houses on the street like a tiger over tall grass. The rest of Doc's house, as much as I'd seen so far, was as odd as the man himself. We had a midnight dinner in a dining room dominated by a beautiful slab of oak table that was probably cost more than my first car. Around 2 a.m. we retired to the parlor to drape ourselves over soft leather couches and plush maroon chairs. We'd had dark red wine with dinner and brandy with dessert, and I was riding a fine buzz as Doc finally got us ready for the main event. We were about to take a tour of a house full of moving rooms and hidden horror. At least, that was the pitch Doc made in his email to me the week before. Alright, I'd like to take a pause. This immediately sounds like a storytelling of like, oh god, what, the board game House on a Hill. Oh, good night, Pixel. which I love that board game, so this like intrigued me immediately. I rated the whole offer as 12 gallons of bullshit in the 10-gallon hat, but my curiosity was ever getting the best of me. Plus, it's not every day that a famous weirdo like Doc invited you to a party. Let's never knock again. Oh no. I turned my attention away from my diminishing glass of liquor back to the group. Doc had wheeled in a big whiteboard, messily sketching out what looked like a cross between floor plans and a corn maze. It's not haunted. Not exactly, Doc explained to the pair of guests closest to him. The house just exists in different places at different times. Everything on the first floor always stays rooted to the here and now, but the second floor is less stable. Furniture will always be in one place at night and another in the morning. Paintings tend to change from week to week, but the real strangeness happens if you take the door leading up to the attic. Let me guess, said Josh, the pudgy 20-something who ran a popular horror blog and podcast. The door that goes to the attic doesn't really lead to the attic, right? Doc shrugged. It does. Eventually. That small blue door at the end of the hall is a fixed point, but the location of the attic is inconsistent. It usually shows up within the first dozen rooms, but I've gone entire trips without seeing it. Just how many rooms does the house have exactly? Asked Holly. She was a workhorse like me, a writer who act out a living doing freelance work and submitting anything not nailed down to the lit mags and pulp anthologies. The invitation said tour the house with 100 doors, so not counting front, back, that's like 98 rooms, suggested Dodger. Next to Doc, Dodger was probably the most famous of the six of us, an indie horror movie darling who directed one brilliant film and 4 mediocre ones. Dodger was his stage name, and it fit him well. Tall and wire-thin, Dodger was constantly in motion. He paced along the enormous bookshelves, plucking out a title here and there, boots whisking softly across posh red rugs. The Doc stood up and moved to the center of the room to address all of us. So, the house with 100 doors is a bit of a misnomer. The truth is, I don't know how many rooms inside reside within the house. It could be 100, or 1,000, or an infinite parade of perpetual doors. Personally, the farthest I've gone is 61 doors. So why say 100? I asked. Doc shrugged. I like the alliteration. It's a simple kind of stop, he snapped. Not that one. Dodger froze, fingers wrapped around a massive black book he'd half extracted from the shelf. Even from across the room, I could make out silver lettering scrimshawed down the spine of the tome. You can read any book in here except for that one. Doc told Dodger, please put it back. Dodger raised one thin eyebrow, but did as Doc asked. Another one of your rules, eh? Asked Dodger. Our host smiled and glanced at the clock. There are only 2 more to go over before we start. The first being, don't look for it. Look for what? Josh began, falling silent as we all heard it. There was a faint whistling outside. It grew steadily louder. The whistler was coming closer. What the hell? Dodger asked, moving from the bookshelf towards the window. Stop, Doc demanded, voice like a bear trap. Dodger obeyed, but turned to Doc, fist clenched. I got the impression the young filmmaker wasn't used to taking orders. I decided to pour myself another drink and reacquaint myself with the glass. What is it? Dodger asked. I don't know, Doc replied. I've never looked. Why not? Because when I moved in, my neighbors made it very clear that the whistling would come every night, but I should never look. Dodger looked perplexed. You just took them at their word? They were very convincing. After a few minutes, the whistling moved past us, then stopped entirely. Weird, muttered Josh, like a little homage to the one we read earlier. I silently agreed, finishing my drink and refilling the glass. We all sat quietly for a few moments. So what's the final rule? Holly asked. It has to do with the rooms as we pass through, Doc explained, and it's a two-part rule. Some of the rooms will require that we complete a task before moving on. Whenever we encounter a locked door, that means there's a task. The rules for each locked door will be different, but also immediately clear. Now, certain rooms will be occupied. The final rule is this: if an occupant asks you a question, you have to answer, and you have to answer truthfully. Dodger walked past Doc and plopped down on the couch next to Holly. Tasks, questions, rules, Dodger said, ticking off his fingers one by one. This is a feeling a little formulatic, I have to say. Yeah, formulatic, sorry. There have to be rules, Dodger. Rules and consequences, said Doc. Can't have an adventure without them. Can't run blindly into a great unknown without a line to hold on to. Rules are like rails, Dodge. Follow them and you'll have a good trip. Rails are safe. Rails are boring. I've always been a fan of forging new paths, said Dodger. Doc grinned, but the smile didn't reach his eyes, drying up somewhere along the climb. That's your decision to make when you're on your own time. But as long as you're on my tour, you'll follow the rules. Speaking of, are we ready? There was a general murmur of confirmation. I topped off my glass and drained it in a quick slug. I felt the warmth settle in my bones. A lazy focus was blossoming behind my eyes. I debated one more for the road, but Holly was giving me an odd look, so I erred on the side of sobriety. Besides, I packed a bottle of Jim Beam and a second backup bottle in case of an emergency. Why are we an alcoholic? I wasn't sure how long our tour would take, but Doc told us to pack like we were going away for the weekend. Let's get going then, Doc said. Everyone rose and stretched. We began shuffling towards the foyer, where we'd all deposited our backpacks and supplies. Outside of the parlor, the house was oddly quiet. There was no whispering from a forgotten TV, no ticking of distant clocks, not even the sound of footsteps, since the hall was filled by a maroon rug roughly as thick as the Amazonian undergrowth. I looked at the silent clock on the foyer wall. It was 3:10 a.m. I yawned, suddenly aware that I was really needed to take a leak. Everyone packed all the items on the list I sent you, right? Doc asked. We're all big boys and girls, so I'm not gonna check. We all nodded. Doc gave a finger gun gesture towards the staircase. Alright, let's ride. Wait, before we go, I almost forgot. Does everybody have those documents I requested? 4 manila envelopes were handed over. As part of our invitation, Doc requested I bring a basic bio and a copy of my most recent will. An off-putting request for sure, but I obliged. We didn't discuss what was in the envelopes as we gave them to Doc, but I assumed he'd make an identical request of each of us. Doc pulled a folded envelope of his own, placed it on top of the pile, and left all 5 packets on a small table next to the staircase. Just in case, was all he said. Doc began to walk up the stairs. Shrugging on our packs, the 4 of us followed. I was struck with the absurd image of this being a childish camping trip. The kind where you and a few of your friends pitch a tent in your backyard. We trotted after Doc, a knockoff fellowship skeptical about the trip ahead. At the top of the stairs, we came upon an expansive open area, everything covered in dark walnut and expensive rugs. There were sculptures and artwork on the wall at regular intervals. I thought about Doc's claim about how the paintings had a tendency to change. They seemed normal enough at the moment, but I couldn't stop myself from looking for some imperceivable sign of movement from the pictures as we passed. We reached the small door Doc had mentioned. It was a robin's egg blue. The door was barely 6 feet tall. Dodger would need to hunch down to pass through. Without saying a word, Doc opened the door and stepped through. The 4 of us remaining shared a collective look, then we followed him through the first door. It's like an entrance. The room we were in was unremarkable. The space was small, dimly lit, walls white and floor bare wood. Couldn't tell if it was a loft or a mudroom or just a small empty bedroom. The small blue door clicked shut behind after We were all in, seemingly on its own. The first piece of weirdness, then, not counting the whistling. Springs? Joss asked, looking back at the closed door. Doc only grinned. A red door, average in every way, stood in the center of the wall opposite where we entered. This is the first major step of the night, Doc told us, gesturing towards the red door. This room is always here. That, he pointed at the blue door, is always there. But after this room, I don't know where each new door will lead. Usually, the first few rooms are pretty harmless and the same things show up consistently. But if you never know, Doc walked back to the blue door. If anyone has second thoughts, this will take you back to the second floor of the house, and you can leave from there. The blue door will follow us as we go. Each room, no matter how strange, will have its own blue door back to the normal world. It's just sometimes the door is, hidden. But it's always there. Somewhere. Doc pulled the blue door open. If this sounds too bizarre for anyone, now is the perfect time. He was cut off by a gentle screech of the door closing on its own again. Doc's face cycled through surprise, confusion, and abject terror with a handful of moments. That's not supposed to happen, I heard him whisper. The tendon in his forearm stood out like a bridge cables as he strained to keep the blue door open. But the door continued its slow grind back towards the wall. Doc shifted his grip away from the doorknob. He had both his hands on the edge of the door now, leaning back against the unseen force moving the hinges. He made himself an anchor against inevitability. Suddenly, the door went from closing in a lazy arc to slamming shut. Doc fell back, tripped, and landed hard on the floorboards. At first, I couldn't process what I was seeing. There were red splotches all over Doc's sweater, his pants, the floor. When he held up his shaking hands, I saw why. The abrupt, irresistible snap of the door meeting its frame had severed the tips off of all of his fingers on both hands. Except for his thumbs, each digit now ended in an ugly pink pulp just above the second knuckle. We stood frozen, staring down at him. But Doc wasn't looking at his hands. He was gawking at the door. That's not supposed to happen, I heard him whisper again. I turned to where Doc's eyes were fixed and felt a groan crawl out of my throat. The blue door was gone, replaced by a blank white wall. That's part one. On to part two! The Crooked Hall. Oh, okay. Sorry that's been a while since my last update. The internet here is unreliable at best, completely dead in most rooms, and barely a blip, even when it does work. I've got a signal here, but it's weak. I'm not sure if I'll even be able to post this after writing it. That doesn't matter too much. I need a distraction either way. We were still shaken up after the hallway. So I'll keep my eyes open, fixed on the screen of my phone, and I'll focus on that, on talking to you. That and nothing else. Let me pick up where I left off. We were all in a daze after Doc was injured. It was surreal, seeing the door slam on its own, shearing off the tips of his fingers where he gripped the frame. And the door was just gone the moment we all looked away. I tried to convince myself that this could all be still a trick or some insane prank. The sight of Doc's ruined hands made it difficult to believe this was anything but horrible, unavoidable reality. Holly was the first to shake herself into action. She slid off her pack and tore through the contents, emerging with a first aid kit. Moving quickly, Holly began disinfecting each of Doc's injured fingers before wrapping them in gauze and medical tape. The rest of us stood around awkwardly. Josh was staring down at Doc's hands, Dodger glaring forward at the blank wall just where the door used to be. I wasn't looking anywhere in particular, just ahead in a haze, wondering if drinking the bourbon in my bag would improve or deteriorate the situation. I decided that I didn't care and brought out the bottle out. Holly's small hands were swift and efficient. Can we help? Dodger asked. Holly shook her head. I've got it. I sat down to watch her work. Dodger and Josh joined me. I passed the bottle around. Holly even spared a moment to take a swig. We all sat on the bare hardwood floor watching Holly. It felt a little awkward. Dodger, Josh, and me all huddled together while Holly wrapped Doc's fingers all by herself. Dodger cleared his throat. You're, very good at that, he told Holly. She nodded tersely but didn't look up from her work. Where did you learn? Dodger trailed off, probably realizing his small talk was only a distraction. The army, Holly replied, eyes never leaving Doc's hand. I was a medic. Oh God! Doc suddenly shouted, snapping out of his daze. Oh God! Shit! He ripped one partially bandaged hand away from Holly and held it in front of his face. There was a distressing amount of empty space where his fingertips should be. Doc began to struggle. Help me, Holly said, trying to hold Doc down as he thrashed. Before Dodger or I could even move, Josh was up, kneeling next to Doc. Josh caught Doc's flailing arm by the wrist and firmly, gently, lowered it to his side. It's okay, Josh said. His other hand on Doc's shoulder. Relax. You're safe. You're safe. Josh had one of the most calming voices I've ever heard. Doc's thrashing lessened, stopped. He went limp, sagging into Josh, who put an arm under Doc's gray-haired head. You're okay, Josh repeated. We're okay. Holly gave Josh a nod of thanks and went back to bandaging Doc. Dodger and I exchanged a sheepish look, and I passed him back the bottle. We were about as useful as a screen door on a submarine. Holly finished wrapping and snipped the medical tape off with a pair of angular scissors. She went back to the rucksack and rummaged around, returning with a small vial and syringe. I'm going to give you something for the pain, Holly told Doc, rolling up his blood-soaked sleeve past his elbow. He didn't reply as she injected him, only stared mutely at the wall where the little blue door used to be. It wasn't supposed to be like this, Doc mumbled. After a few minutes, his breathing became shallow and his eyes closed. Doc was sleeping. Josh gently extracted himself, fetched his backpack and propped it under Doc's head as a makeshift pillow. Holly exhaled deeply, then put her kit back in her bag. Well, fuck, Dodger muttered, glancing around the tight room. 4 blank white walls surrounded us, only with a single red door to break the pattern. The floor was cold, the ceiling low, and I desperately needed to take a leak. Yeah, fuck, Holly agreed, sitting down. Dodger moved in the opposite direction, standing and stretching long limbs towards the ceiling. I cleared my throat. Hey, I feel awkward about this, but I forgot to use the restroom before we got started. All the excitement, you know, and, 1 or 2, Holly asked. Just 1, I replied. She nodded, reaching into her bag and tossing me an empty Gatorade bottle. You really are prepared, I mumbled, slinking off to the corner. We all found ways to kill time while Doc slept. I knew we'd eventually need to walk through that red door. None of us were eager to take the plunge without our guide, though. Holly rested near Doc, her eyes closed. I wasn't sure if she was sleeping or just decompressing. Dodger was pacing back and forth, walking along each wall over and over. He was scowling, and his caged animal vibes were making me a little anxious. Josh, on the other hand, remained a calming influence. The 2 of us sat quietly on the floor near Doc, the bourbon between us. You think this is real? Josh asked. The image of the door closing on Doc's fingers popped into my mind like a boil. It feels real, I replied. I couldn't help but picture Doc's severed fingertips lying in a jumble like fallen Jenga pieces on the other side of the wall. Eventually, Dodger joined us sitting on the floor, not saying much. Doc began stirring not long after. He tried to pull himself up, winced when his hand touched the floor. We need to start moving, Doc said groggily. Holly gently pressed him back down. You need to rest. He needs to tell us what the fuck is going on, Dodger said. Doc shook his head, seemingly punch-drunk. I don't know. This hasn't happened before. The blue door never goes away this early. Something is wrong. I'm sorry, I don't know what, but something is different this time. Dodger shook his head. Bullshit. Doc held up his 2 disfigured hands. If this was a prank or joke, Dodger, I would have picked a better punchline. We all sat squirming for a bit. Help me up, Doc asked. Josh and I looked at Holly. When she nodded, we moved to Doc. He was shaking on his feet, clearly still feeling the effects of blood loss and whatever Holly had given him. But he looked determined. Okay, I'm going to go first. Follow single file and stick together. Maybe I should go first, Holly suggested. Doc glanced down at his bandaged hands. Yeah, he admitted. Doorknobs might be an issue, but I'll be right behind you. Then Dodger, then Aaron. I guess that's us. We're Aaron. Josh, you bring up the rear. Holly took a deep breath and approached the red door. She tried the knob. It seemed to turn cleanly. The door swung open. From where I was standing in the back, it looked like another bare room, similar to an unfinished apartment with no furniture. Instead of white walls with a red door, there were blue walls with a brown door across from us. Here goes nothing, Holly said. We made it through the first room without incident, then the second, then the third. Not all of the rooms were bare. The fifth room was passed through was a tasteful, if small, bedroom. All blue pillows and modern furniture. It looked like an ad from IKEA. The eighth room had shag carpets and no furniture, only a ping pong table at the center and a few folding metal chairs pressed against the wall. The 14th room was a home office dominated by a huge wooden desk in the corner, with cream-colored walls and a ceiling fan rotating lazily above us. No one said it, but it quickly became obvious that, even if we were somehow turning in circles, there was no way the house was large enough to contain so many rooms. Nothing about any of the rooms stood out as alarming, however. The farther we pressed on, the more small oddities I noticed. Some of the floors felt a few inches off of even. Walls were occasionally asymmetrical, with one side just barely shorter than the other three. The art of the wall stood out the most. Moving through a bedroom, we passed a picture of a family at a park. The painting itself was quite lovely, all pastel greens and sun-swept meadows. However, the faces of the family all looked manic, wide-eyed, completely at odds with the serenity of the scene. In the 19th room, we came to a tall gray door. This room was colder than the other doors so far. When Holly turned the knob, we found ourselves facing a dim, narrow hallway. Holly hesitated. This one feels weird, she said. They all feel fucking weird, Dodger replied. We don't seem to have many options, I said. We can't really go back. Holly began walking down the hallway and we followed. The farther we progressed, the darker and cooler the hall became. My arm brushed against one of the walls and I was surprised how rough it felt and damp. It's like a tunnel, I heard Josh whisper behind me. Or a cave, I thought. It's getting darker, Holly said. Flashlights out. We stopped for a few moments to dig lights out of our packs. 5 beams of blue bright light snapped to life, one after another. The flashlights were a comfort. They weren't providing as much illumination as they should. Something about the shadows in the hallway resisted, clinging stubbornly to the floor, walls, and ceiling. It was hard to see more than a dozen or so yards in front of us, so it caught everyone off guard when we came to the first bend in the hallway. It was like a shallow curve and uneven. This didn't seem like anything that was built or measured. The hall was more like some imperfect path you find in nature. It's getting tighter, Dodger said, reaching up with one hand and managing to touch his fingertips to the ceiling. After passing the first bend, the walls began to feel narrower, their sides rougher. The floor also had a slight, steady decline now. We passed a second bend, then a third. Then we came upon a sudden steep rise in the floor that we had to climb over. The space we had to maneuver in continued to shrink. It was a good thing we were moving in single file because soon enough my shoulders were neatly rubbing the sides of the hall with each step. I've always been mildly claustrophobic, and my eyes made me sweaty, and I avoided the crawl space under my house like it was an ex at a party. This was something different, worse. I forced myself to swallow down the ember of panic trying to ignite in my throat. Up ahead, I heard Holly curse and we all stopped. It was so dark now that everyone around me was shadowy, outlined with blurred features, even with our flashlights. We need to turn back, Holly said from the front. It gets tight up ahead, and there's a sharp, blind end. I think it's only big enough to wiggle through. We should go back. Only big enough to wiggle through, I thought. The ember of panic was a steady burn now, and I could feel cold sweat all over my body. If we go back, we're just spinning our wheels, Doc said. Better to spin our wheels than risk, I began. Doc's right. Dodger cut me off. I still think there's something deeply fucked about this whole situation, but there's no point in going backward. We've been through those rooms already. We know there's no door back, no way out. So unless everyone wants to play ping pong for the next 20 years, I think we need to press on. Can we just go back and call the cops, I asked? At least one of the rooms back there has internet. Even if you could connect a call, which I'm not sure the house would allow, the doc said. And even if the police burst through the little blue door at the start with a full SWAT team, there's very little chance they'd ever find us. The rooms wouldn't be in the same order if anyone came in behind us. How can you know? Josh asked. Doc shrugged. Because I've tried it before, with others, more than once. Each path is different. The house is never set. I'm sorry, there's only one direction we can go. We all stood silently for a moment. Balls, said Holly. We'll have to leave the packs. This was met with murmurs and curses, but we all could plainly see that there was no room for the large bags. The five of us stuffed as many essentials as we could into our pockets. I saw Holly's flashlight dip as she turned sideways. Okay, one at a time, and stay close. If anyone gets stuck, the person in front of them pulls, the person behind pushes. Holly's light disappeared as she slipped into the fissure. I couldn't exhale until I heard her give the all clear from the other side. One by one, we followed. When it was my turn, I took every ounce of self-control I had to shimmy my way through the narrow bend. The rough walls pressed close, forcing me to work one shoulder through, then drag the rest of my body along. I held my breath and pushed. For one horrible second, I felt wedged in. Then Dodger's hand reached back and closed around my wrist, pulling me forward. At the same time, I felt Josh behind me nudging me forward with his shoulder. I exited the crevice like a popped cork. Doc and Dodger both reached in to help Josh squeeze through. Hi, Keen. Welcome. Josh tore his shirt badly. There was a little more room on his side of the bend, but the way forward was even darker. As we pushed ahead, the walls became tighter and tighter until it was worse than before. The ceiling was dropping and the floor was rising. Soon Dodger had to hunch over to walk. Then we were all hunched. Fuck, 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 I whispered to myself, trying to push down the claustrophobia. There's another crevice ahead, Holly called back. Just the same as before, okay? We got this. One at a time. It took much longer for Holly to get the all clear after she went in. Be careful, she called back, sounding winded. It's a real mess. I had to crawl. There's going to be a gradual climb, then a hard left, then a sharp drop out of fucking nowhere, and finally a short hook, like a J shape at the end. It's a squeeze, just keep moving. I was having a hard time swallowing. Holly was petite, short, and maybe 115 pounds. If she thought it was a squeeze, the rest of us were in trouble. Hey, I see the door, it's right here, Holly called back excited. We're almost through. I watched Doc disappear into the shadows of the bend. It's a lot of moving, just leave me to die, I'm sorry. Welcome in. Dodger waited before following. Even in the dark, I could see his hands shaking. I took a deep breath, sucked in my chest and gut, and began to push through. The first bend was a nightmare. The second passage was a tight knot of hell. I could feel the walls pressing against me, forcing me to take shallow breaths. There was no room to turn around, no leeway. I was quickly forced to my hands and knees as the space constricted. When I came to the rise Holly mentioned, I had to drop to my stomach to pitch through. The corridor felt like it had its own unique gravity, crushing and heartless. I began to hyperventilate, face mashed against the unyielding stone. All I could do was force myself forward, inch by inch, stomach on the ground, with the top of the tunnel brushing against my back. I had to contort my body as much as possible to keep moving when the passage curved left. My heartbeat sounded like a panicked crowd running in my ears. I wiggled my shoulders past the turn, both arms scraping painfully until I managed to twist partially on my side in a corkscrew. This allowed me to sneak beyond the bend, but pinned my left arm, the one holding my flashlight. The dark ahead was complete. I felt for the drop Holly mentioned with my free arm and gasped when I found out how steep it was. Without my light, I couldn't see how far the decline dropped or how tight it would get. I began to tremble, frozen. My body ached from crawling, my arms were cramping, and the pressure from the walls made it hard to breathe. All I wanted to do was back up into more open spaces. Fuck it, I would play ping pong for the rest of eternity if it was somewhere I could take a full fucking breath. I tried to inch forward and felt my shoulder wedged tightly against the wall. I was trapped. No, this is not the Junji Ito story, though it does feel similar. Oh Christ. Oh God, I thought. Hey, are you okay? Holly's voice came popping out of the darkness. No, I replied. I was crying. I'm stuck. Oh God, I think I'm stuck. Help, help, fucking help me, please. My breathing was so rapid I was worried I was going to have a heart attack. Calm down, Aaron. Relax, relax, Holly told me. Listen to my voice. Can you hear me? Yes. I whimpered. Okay, it's not going to feel comfortable, but I need you to push all of your air out, Holly continued. Make yourself small. Where are you? Are you at the drop yet? Yes. That's good, Holly said. You're almost there. You're doing great. The passage opens up after the drop, Aaron. Just keep moving. No flashlight, no room. All I had to latch on to was her voice. Just keep moving. I grabbed onto Panic, wrestled it, and shoved as much of it as I could into a little mental lockbox. It wouldn't hold it for long, but it might hold long enough. Exhale, inhale, exhale as hard as I could. I let my air out and tried to drag myself forward. It wasn't enough. I was stuck. And the second before I could inhale to scream, I felt pressure on my foot. Josh, I thought. Hold on, he said. 3, 2, 1. Push! I threw myself forward as hard as I could. At the same time, Josh shoved me from behind. I was shocked at how strong he was. For an endless moment, I stayed in place, caught in the grip of the tunnel. Then there was a yanking pain in both arms as I was moving. The drop was deep and sudden, but wider as well. I managed to wrench my left arm free from my side, and I was crawling. There was a terrifying moment at the end of the slide when I came to the hook, a small stone lip that I had to climb up, bent in an awkward position. The Panic got out of its box, and I started screaming, thrashing. I was able to twist so that my upper body was on the lip. Luckily, I was close enough that I could see the glimmer of a flashlight. Strong hands reached down and I grabbed for them. Doc and Dodger pulled me out. My chest and back were scraped to pieces, but I was out. All I could do was collapse on the ground and pant. It was several minutes before I collected myself enough to look over and see Holly, Doc, and Dodger huddled together, shining their flashlights into the passage opening. Josh wasn't out yet. Shakily, I stood up and joined them. The tunnel carried sound strangely. I could hear the echo of sobbing. Josh, you're almost out, Holly called out. We're here. Come close and we'll pull you the rest of the way. Josh's voice came back strained. I can't. It's too tight. I'm stuck. Oh God, please someone help. I shuddered. The taste of that particular horror was still fresh for me. Josh had it worse though. He was larger than I was, heavier. There was no one behind him to push. The sobbing suddenly turned into screaming. Josh, Dodger yelled, what's wrong? I can't back up. I can't back up. No. He barely sounded human as the distortion of the cave and the hysteria in his voice. Please help. Please, someone's come to get me, please. Doc leaned as far into the opening as he could. Josh, calm down. You need to focus. Fuck you, Josh screamed back. I couldn't really blame him. You can hate me if you want, Doc replied gently, but hate me once you're out. The house, it reacts to extreme emotions. It reacts in unpredictable ways. You could have fucking mentioned that before, Doc, Dodger whispered. I didn't want to alarm anyone. Consider us alarmed, Dodger spat back. Please! Josh's scream was something primal, the desperation of an animal in a trap. Please come get me. It's getting tighter. Why is it getting tighter? If the house reacts to extreme emotions, Josh's panic must have been blood in the water. I'm going to try, Holly said. Someone hold my legs. Dodger nodded and stood ready. It didn't matter. Holly couldn't squeeze back in. What the hell? She said. I made it out just fine. It's getting tighter, Doc said. The house is reacting. Josh, stop screaming. Is someone coming? He begged, please. I'm sorry. I'm stuck. I'm sorry. We can't, Dodger said. Not yet. We will, though. Just calm down. The house will ease up. A long silence. I don't want to die. I could barely hear Josh. It's so hard to breathe, he said. I don't want to die here. You won't, Dodger yelled. We'll be there soon. Hold steady. It's getting harder to breathe. Josh was gasping. Please. Dodger turned away from the passage. God damn it. Aaron, Josh called. Aaron, is this real? No. I lied. No, we're not really here. Josh, we're in a pub at Baltimore, okay? Okay, he replied weakly. Listen, this is the best pub in the city. I know this place well. We're at the bar, Josh. Do you hear me? Yeah, Aaron. I hear you. He was so quiet. And his voice came back loud, raw. I don't want to die here. We're at a bar, I insisted. We're having a drink, telling ghost stories and dirty jokes. This isn't real. It was hard to keep my voice from cracking. We're not really here. The silent moments stretched longer and longer. Josh was alternating between mumbling and crying. I heard him call the name Jennifer. I'm sorry, Jen, Josh said. I'm sorry. We'll sort it. Fix it. We'll be okay, Jennifer. This isn't real. I don't want to die here. Being stuck in the dark, oxygen deprived, I knew that it could make people hallucinate. I hoped whatever phantoms Josh was seeing gave him comfort. They were the only company he had up there. I kept checking my watch, time crawling by in glowing blue numerals. After 20 minutes, Josh wasn't screaming anymore, or talking, but we could still hear him breathing, starving for air. Nearly 40 minutes after I started counting, we didn't hear any sounds at all from the passage. We waited an hour, Holly and Dodger trying every few minutes to find a way back to the tunnel. It was no use. The house never relaxed or relented. The opening stayed swollen, nearly shut. Doc was the first of us to turn away from the hallway and towards the door. This door was yellow, with a copper border matching the knob. Not yet, Dodger said. Doc sighed and shook his head. He used both of his damaged hands to turn the knob and open the door. The three of us hesitated, and then Holly and I silently followed. Dodger was the last to leave, but didn't linger once the rest of us left. The yellow door led us into a large, cozy kitchen. We're still here. I'm tapping this out on my phone with shaking hands. Holly gave Doc some more, I think, morphine, and changed his bandages. Crawling through the passage at a real number on his fingers. He's sleeping now. Holly keeps pacing around the room, checking and rechecking every cabinet. There is no food in the kitchen except for a bowl of waxed fruit on the marble counter. Dodger sat in the kitchen table, staring at the wall. There was a painting there on the inside of a slaughterhouse. The workers were dressed in red-stained white overalls and looked absolutely ecstatic, surrounded by ripped open pigs on hooks. Every time I close my eyes, I hear Josh's last words. I don't want to die here. Well, that was part 2. We have one death. Part 3, the canvas and the chimes. Excuse me. Take a quick water break. I've got the ghost of a signal here, so I'm trying to write an update. My hands are shaking so badly it's hard to type. Stupid fucking phone. Stupid fucking house. I'm not sure if it's the memories of the gallery making me shake, or the cold. The frostbitten breeze has ebbed and flowed since we passed through the door. Oh, thank you. That's a story. I'm gonna have to check out the VOD. Yeah, this is we're now in part 3. Oh, water and feed. Thank you. Well, I have, where'd that box go? There it is. One Pocky for me. A frostbitten breeze has ebbed and flowed since we passed through the door. The chill is starting to seep into my bones like a stain into a carpet. I don't know if this is risk of hypothermia cold, but Christ is it miserable. At least Holly is finally sleeping. It felt so unfair for Holly, Dodger, and Doc, and me to be sitting in the perfect empty little kitchen with Josh dead on the other side of the door. After Doc woke up from his morphine nap, we all gathered around the table. It was silent for a long time. Did he have a family? Dodger asked. We all looked to Doc since he'd made us submit bios before we started. Nobody mentioned Doc's side. The bright light spilling from the tiny, tasteful chandelier above us felt almost profane. Josh was left in the dark. He died slow and afraid. His body was still back in that hallway. Someone just say a few words, I suggested. We waited awkwardly for anyone else to begin. He was brave, Dodger said finally. Josh held it together better than I would have. I liked his blog, Holly added. He was a creative guy. He saved my life, I said. When I was stuck, if Josh wasn't there to push, to help me through, I would have... that was all I was able to get out. It was about all there was to say on the matter. We made ready to go through the next door. There was no food in the kitchen, but we weren't leaving empty-handed. A set of knives with walnut handles gleamed sharp and polished on the counter next to the refrigerator. The handles were magnetized, the blades arranged from the largest to the smallest, and stuck to a board. At Holly's suggestion, we each took a knife with us. I cinched mine through the belt of my side. I felt like the world's saddest pirate. Most of us selected slim steak or paring knives. Dodger grabbed the heavy cleaver. I wondered if he expected to encounter any logs that needed splitting on our journey. Dodger noticed me looking askance at his borderline sword. He grinned. You never know. The door leading out of the kitchen was soft cherry wood, a light red-brown in color. Holly took her place at the front of the line. Doc joined her. Doc joined her. I can't read, sorry. I think it'd be better to have you cover our backs, he told Holly. I'll take point from here, then Aaron, then Dodger. This is usually about as far as I get into the house before things go truly bizarre. Not that there's anything unusual about this trip. Holly hesitated but shrugged and moved to the back of the line we were forming. Dodger was giving Doc a peculiar look, as if something was clicking into place and Dodger wasn't sure what to make of it. Ready? Doc asked, opening the door. Before any of us could reply, he slammed the door shut. What? Holly asked. Doc turned to us. Yellow fucking wallpaper. Oh, shit, I said. That's bad, right? Dodger asked. I was sort of tuned out earlier when you were going over the rules. We were all looking at him. My bad, he added. There's nowhere else for us to go, Doc said, tugging at the sleeve of his flannel. Just nowhere else. So we have to go through. Everybody stay sharp. Keep close. Stay calm. He opened the door and we all went through. We found ourselves in a den. It reminded me of my grandfather's TV room, where he used to retreat to watch football and drink warm Budweiser. There was a brown shag carpet that cushioned every footfall. The room was empty except for a large leather recliner in the center of the room and an old-fashioned television, kind with a rabbit-eared antenna. Peeling yellow wallpaper stretched from the corner to corner. The space was small, and the door was on the opposite side of the wall from where we came in. Well, Dodger asked. Doc began padding across the carpet, slow and steady, and the television came to life with a distinct pop of vacuum tubes. The grainy picture and the small screen made it difficult to see the program, so we all inched closer. Oh, fuck. It's us, Dodger whispered. It's this room, isn't it? It was. Even though the picture was sprinkled with static, the four figures on the television were clearly Doc, Dodger, Holly, and me. The TV showed the room we were in, the den with the shag carpet. However, there was one difference between the room we were standing in and the one reflected on the television. The TV showed something sitting in the empty leather chair. There was a shadow, the size and shape of a child, distorted like a mirage hovering over the summer pavement. As we watched the screen, the hazy shadow slid from the chair to face us. Nope, I said absolutely not. I guess everyone agreed with my assessment because the four of us were across the carpet and through the door in the space of one hanging moment. The next room, a bedroom, was uneventful. So was the room after, and the one after that, and the one after that. Guest rooms, living rooms, home offices all went winding by. However, the little details kept getting stranger and stranger. We passed through a bathroom that had a sick, small Joshua tree hanging in the shower. Later, our group passed through an overgrown greenhouse. Decaying furniture sat in the middle of the room, wrapped with vines and kudzu. The walls were glass and looked out into the star-choked sky over an endless field. We debated breaking the glass to see if we could slip outside, but Doc was skeptical it would even work. He guessed that even trying could cause the house to react. I remember Josh gasping as the air squeezed out of him in the hall. I wasn't overly eager to see what kind of reaction trying to break through a wall would provoke from the house. Looking back, I wish we'd at least tried. Rooms kept getting less and less recognizable. There was a room where the floor was covered by several inches of red-hot sand, and another with a shallow pond spreading out from a corner. Then we came to a garage. A large flat-screen TV hung on the wall in front of a chase lounge. Each corner of the room had its own entertainment. A punching bag in one corner, a retro arcade machine in another, a pool table, a computer with a desk. Off to the side, a bright neon Miller Lite sign glowed from a place of honor on the wall. Dodger looked sick. What's wrong? Holly asked. We piled into the room and formed a loose half circle with the chase in the middle. Dodger's mouth worked up and down for a moment before he could speak. This is my garage, Dodger said. We shouldn't be here. This room shouldn't be here. We've been here long enough that the house is starting to know us, Doc said. That happens. Sometimes. The house can read our minds? I asked. Kinda, sorta, Doc replied. I looked around uneasily, wondering what the house might come cherry-pick out of my mind. Of course it can, Dodger muttered. I'm starting to think this whole thing became a bad acid trip I'm having. I'm probably passed out in my hot tub imagining you all. Doc made his way to the door. Let's keep moving. Wait, Dodger instructed. Ruffling through the cabinet under the television, he emerged with a bottle of vodka. I could have hugged him. I guess the house is thorough when it goes skittering through our heads, eh? Dodger said. I always keep a bottle here. If the house made that, I'm not sure I would drink it, Holly warned. We all looked at Doc. He shrugged. I've had food here before and nothing happened, Doc said. It's fine. Probably. I'm 75% sure. Dodger stuck his tongue out at Holly and took a swig. We all waited to see if he was going to start choking, or vomit, or catch on fire, or any other insanity the house might have stuffed into the bottle. Instead, he shrugged and swished another mouthful of vodka around. Tastes like classic Polish potato water to me, Dodger said. handed me the bottle. I was probably a little too quick to follow his lead, but I didn't care. The flavorless bite of the vodka gentled my nerves and flushed my cheeks. I looked up after having a deep, deep pull on the bottle to find everyone watching me, eyebrows raised. Seems fine to me as well, I said, passing the bottle to Holly. She was more reluctant, but eventually took a drink, as did Doc. Roger pulled an empty black plastic bag from the small metal trash can by the desk. Bring the alcohol, he declared, plopping it into the bag. We left the room with a lighter step than when we entered. It was manufactured chemical relief, though, not a genuine ease. The house was in my head, in all of our heads. What was it we were going to find? What was it going to pull out? Hope the burp was in the story. It did not, but I made an impromptu decision. After the garage, the next room sent a shiver dancing down my spine. This one is mine, I whispered. We were in my home office. I recognized the brown faux wood desk I ordered from Amazon, the off-balance chair with the coaster under one leg, even the coffee-stained stack of papers. What I didn't recognize was the picture on the desk. It was a photo of me as a child on the ground under a tree. I had a look of absolute agony written all over my face. I was cradling my arm. It was bent in an unnatural angle. A subtle white blur of broken bone jutted out of the skin, just under my elbow. I still remember that fall. Feeling my arm bend until it snapped was the most pain I've felt. I needed 3 surgeries to fix the break. That day was one of the most miserable of my childhood. To the best of my knowledge, no picture was ever taken of me under the tree with my twisted arm. Even if one did exist, there's no way I'd frame it and keep it on my desk. Something is wrong here, I said. This is my office, but it's just wrong. We went through quickly. The next room belonged to Doc. Did we get out? Dodger asked. The 4 of us were back in Doc's parlor. That was the place where all of this really started. The room where he told us the rules. When Josh was still alive. I don't think we're out, Doc said. I think the house is just, I'm not sure. Messing with us isn't the right way to put it. Holly began exploring the bookshelves. It's looking for reaction, isn't it? She turned back to us. The house is poking us to see what happens. If this is poking, I don't want to see what happens when it starts prodding, I said. Oh, Christ, Doc whispered. I turned to follow his eyes and saw a portrait hanging on the wall. It was beautifully painted in muted blues and grays and whites. The picture was a young Doc, sitting alone in a row of chairs. It looked like some kind of waiting room. His face was hidden in his hands, but it was easy to read his body language, the slump of his shoulders. I could almost feel the waves of grief rolling off of him. The hospital, Doc said, after Rebecca's miscarriage. She was 3 weeks from her due date. We've been decorating the nursery all day. I'm so sorry, Holly said, coming to stand next to Doc. That painting 100 per fucking cent was not there before, I heard Dodger remark from somewhere behind me. Not back in the, I don't know, real world, I guess you'd call it. Poking and prodding, Doc muttered. He stood staring at the painting for a long time. The rest of us milled around. Okay, Doc said after a few minutes. We should keep going. I expected a room for Holly next. I bet we all did. And I was right, but I didn't expect it to be occupied. We emerged from Doc's parlor into a smaller space, a bedroom. The lighting was dim. A single bright nightlight in the corner provided all the illumination we had. It cast shadows off the chairs, the small bed, and the wind chimes. They were everywhere, the chimes, hanging from ceiling and from shelves. There was no breeze, but they rang softly as we came through the door. In addition to the wind chimes, the room was decorated with dozens of pictures on the walls. It was hard to make out details in the dim room, but I could tell the pictures closest to me were drawn in crayon and almost entirely done in black and red. More concerning than the low light, the chimes or the pictures, was the lump under the covers on the bed. "This was my old room, when I was a kid," Holly whispered. Her voice was usually so steady, so efficient, but it was wavering now. It's not right. This isn't how it was. We should—
Hi, Holly.
The voice came from a small bump on the bed. Holly began to shake.
Holly.
The voice said again, more terse this time. There was an odd sing-song quality to the voice, a sweetness that bordered on saccharine. It made the hairs stand up on my neck. "Hi, Ava," replied Holly. The lump on the bed began to squirm. "Holly," Doc murmured, a note of warning. "Careful. Whoever it is, whatever it is, remember, do not lie." Holly nodded.
Where did you go?
Ava asked. Holly swallowed. "I grew up,"
You left me. I looked for you.
Ava said.
I never stopped looking for you. At first I was afraid for you. Then I missed you. I don't miss you so much anymore. Why did you leave?
I grew up," Holly repeated.
You abandoned me.
Ava said, voice cracking a whip of accusation.
You left me alone in the dark. You were the only one I had to talk to. Why would you do that? How could you do that?
"Because you're not real," Holly whispered. "None of this is real." The lump on the bed grew taller as Ava stood. She writhed, and the blanket slipped away. Ava looked like a young girl wearing a pale blue summer dress. It was hard to guess her exact age because her face was deformed, features smeared and stretched until they ran together. "What the fuck?" Dodger said. She is... Holly swallowed hard again. "That's the way I used to draw her. I was young. I could never get the details right. I always had to erase and erase until there was just a smudge." Holly shook her head and took a hesitant step towards Ava. "You're not real,"
Everything is real here.
Ava said, sliding off the bed. The chimes began to clink and rustle. "Go," Doc said, and we did. Holly stood frozen for a moment, but Dodger grabbed her, half carried and half hustled her to the door. I was the last one out and glanced over my shoulder to see Ava standing next to the bed, uneven blur of eyes watching us. I think she was smiling. I stumbled through the door and Doc kicked it shut. We all looked shaken, but Holly looked rattled. She'd been the first to act when Doc was hurt. She'd tried to climb back into the tunnel to save Josh. To see her pale and trembling, it made me start to feel a little rattled myself. "We need to calm down," Doc advised, working to control his breathing. You ever notice how telling someone to calm down usually has the exact goddamn opposite effect? Dodger asked. I looked around this new room and I let out an involuntary gasp. It was the largest space we'd entered yet. High vaulted ceilings were held by soaring marble pillars. The floor was marble as well, white and glossy as wet bone. The most striking features of the room were the walls. Every inch of them, from floor to ceiling, was covered in a gigantic mural. I say mural, but it would be more accurate to say murals, each flowing seamlessly into the next, each more disturbing than the last. That gave me shivers. Did not see the voice coming, sorry. The murals showed beautifully illustrated snapshots of the worst moments in my life. I recognized myself as a teen burying my childhood dog under the same oak tree I'd fallen from when I broke my arm. Past the column on my left, I saw a picture of my old apartment. The door was open to the dirty street, framing Tom's back as he walked out forever. The doctor's office after he came back with the results of Mom's biopsy. I found myself drifting around the room, unable to look away from the trauma painted on every wall. The mural contained more than just my worst days. I saw a picture of Doc holding the hand of a bleeding woman, both of them lying in the sand next to the ocean. There was Dodger on a long winter road being pulled out of the mangled ruins of his car, his face lit with raw agony. Over in the corner, I saw Holly in camo and combat gear, desperately trying to pull back the shiny red insides of a fellow soldier torn open on the desert road. There were more dozens of tragedies, large and small, etched artfully all around us. I heard Holly suppress a sob behind me. Poking and prodding, Doc said again. Jesus wept. Try not to look. Easier said than done. We drawn together towards the center of the room. We should, I began, mouth snapping shut on my tongue when I heard the sound of wind chimes. The ceiling light closest to the door we'd come through died, darkness following like a slamming gate. Move! Dodger shouted. We crossed the room quickly, illustrated walls crawling by in a taunting blur. Another light flickered and died behind us, and the sound of chimes rang louder. I thought I could detect a faint laughter under the noise. The next door rose tall and wide in front of us. It was strangely textured. It took me a moment to realize the entire opening was covered in a heavy blank canvas. A bronze doorknob stood out against the white. Doc reached for it and cursed. It's locked, he said. Lights kept popping and dying, a rolling wave of pitch black crashing towards us. The wind chimes were a cacophony of teeth-grinding ringing. There's a task, right? I asked Doc. That's what you said before. That some rooms have required something before you can leave? What do you do with a blank canvas? Doc said to himself. Suddenly he pulled out the kitchen knife he had tucked under his belt. With one tight motion, Doc tugged down at the blade and opened a razor-red slit in his palm. He pressed his open hand to the canvas and traced a slick arc across the door. Are you nuts? Dodger asked. Doc let his bleeding hand drop to his side. Do you have a better idea? Dodger hesitated only for a second. Another light went out and the room suddenly felt small and claustrophobic. Fuck, Dodger said, through gritted teeth, dragging the edge of his cleaver across his palm and smearing a streak of red against the canvas. Aaron, Doc said. I fumbled with the knife in my belt. The wind chimes were so loud, like church bells in a hailstorm. Doc got tired of waiting, grabbed my arm and sliced my palm with his knife. I bit back a yelp, then added my blood to the door. Holly, Doc said. Holly! She was turned away from us, staring back into the dark gallery. Dodger pulled her towards the door. Come on, he said gently, but loudly enough to be heard over the mad bang of the chimes. Dodger cut her palm. Holly winced and seemed to snap back to the moment. With one last glance, she pressed her hand onto the canvas. Before she could pull back, two small hands pushed through the other side of the door, wrapping around Holly's fingers. Oh God, she said. Oh God, let go, let go, let go, let go, let go.
Sure thing,
a voice said from everywhere around us. Ava's fingers sunk into Holly's hand and then ripped back, degloving all of the skin from Holly's wrist to her fingertips and pulling out the nails. Holly stumbled back, shrieking. Her blood splashed in a red ribbon across the canvas. The door clicked open. The last light was dying above us. Dodger caught Holly as she tripped and pulled her through the door. Doc and I followed on his heels, shutting the door behind us. We all collided, falling into a pile of dirt, cold, and fresh pine needles. Somehow we'd stumbled into a wide-open forest within the house. Evergreens towered above us, the tree line broken by puddles of dark sky tattooed by unfamiliar constellations. There's signal out here. Somehow. Oh yeah, big ouchie. Holly is sleeping. We gave her what little morphine she had in her pocket. There were no bandages left, so we could only clean her shredded hand with Dodger's vodka and wrap it in torn sleeve from Doc's flannel. It's getting colder. The wind is picking up. Doc's watching over Holly. Dodger and I are sharing what's left of the alcohol. No one's talking. We got a peek in Dodger's bag when he brought out the bottle. There's a huge book in there. Black. Silver lettering on the spine. When he falls asleep, Dodger whispered, nodding towards Doc. This motherfucker took the book. Alright, part 4. The theater in the clearing. Thank you for feed and water. Oh, that was an air bubble. How are you guys liking this story? The premise kind of reminds me of Betrayal at House on the Hill, which is a board game. That was an air pocket, I heard. I'm sorry. Story is pretty fire. I'm really, really liking it. I'm gonna take another swig. Hopefully no pocket of air this time. There we go. It's fucking awesome. Oh, really? You're enjoying it? This is Snack, by the way, my roommate. I'm surprised you're enjoying it. You didn't seem like the horror story kind of type. Reminds me of an old movie about an evil house that tried to eat a couple kids. What, Monster House? Is that what it is? Or is the house on Elm Street? Something like that. One of those. Yeah. I'm glad everyone's having a good time. Alright, part 4. The theater in the clearing. I think I'm gonna die here. I'm not trying to be fatalistic, but things have come apart. They're all around us, watching. All we can do is wait. So I'll keep writing. It's better than staring at the screen or shadows moving between the trees. It all started with the book. Well, I asked, trying to lean over Dodger's shoulder to read from the page he had opened. We were perched on a simple dirt trail at the top of an embankment. I'll give you the spark notes in a second, he said, glancing up. Just keep your eyes on our friend. I turned to look for Doc. He was sleeping, back against the tree near the edge of the path we were on. Holly was sleeping as well, curled up in the grass not far from Dodger and me. I didn't know how either of them could sleep in the cold. The thin shirt I was wearing provided no protection against the chill. There was a bite in the wind that rustled the trees around us. The night air was crisp and smelled like pine. The stars above us provided an unnatural amount of light. I noticed webs in the forest, billowing silk that fell across the trees like tinsel. The wind stirred the branches and I shivered, wrapping my arms around my chest, trying to keep my body heat from fleeing this sinking ship that was my sorry ass. I couldn't resist looking back towards Dodger. He had the strangest expression on his face, confusion and worry displayed in equal measure. What does it say? I whispered. Dodger shook his head. It's rambling. Part journal, part I don't even fucking know. He dies, and the world dies with him. The body fails, the mind begins to reach. There's just so much weirdness here, little slices of crazy scrawled across the pages along with the daily journal. What's the journal about? I asked, leaning closer. Doc. About one of his trips here. If this is right, Dodger flipped between pages. Then Doc and his group were here for maybe months? Years? It doesn't make sense. But it does seem to be from Doc's point of view. Oh Jesus, listen to this. He waits on the cliff, attended by the taken, / we all hold our borrowed breath from dying dreams he awakens. Kinda fucking odd, don't you think? Everything here is odd, I mumbled. Everything is wrong. Doc and Holly were both maimed by the trip. Josh, I couldn't stop thinking about Josh's final words. I don't want to die here. The house trapped him, pressed the air from his lungs and the life from his body, slowly, horribly. Christ, Dodger whispered, flipping towards the end of the book. He looked up at me, his sharp blue eyes catching me. Doc's wife, his friends. So many people died here. I moved so I could see the book. Dodger didn't protest. His handwriting was a mad scramble, black ink staggered dancing across the page. What I saw was part journal, part poem, or maybe a fever dream? The blind seer has shown me he is fragile. He holds us on shattered shoulders. We walk through him. We must tread gently. Should he stir, memory remembers and recoils. His name is the whip of the ages, I read to myself. The rambling verses rushed together into more conventional purpose. Day 88. Jonathan fell down this morning and could not get up. The blood loss was too much for him. We took turns dragging him. None of us had the strength to carry him, not while he struggled weakly like a gutted fish. Annie wanted to bury him, but this isn't a place to waste anything. Who knows what the doors ahead might... Where did you find that? Doc asked from behind us. I let myself get distracted. I wasn't watching him, hadn't seen him approach. His footfalls were muffled by the fallen pine needles covering the ground. Doc stood on the path, looked ragged in his torn flannel, gray hair tousled and struck with leaves from where he'd slept against a tree. He didn't look angry or concerned. His well-wrinkled eyes just looked tired. Dodger closed the black book and leveled it like a dueling pistol at Doc. Be honest with me. Are you completely fucking crazy? Calm down, Doc said. Dodger stood up. I sheepishly followed. It felt like we'd been caught snooping through Doc's privacy. Then I thought of the unsettling scribbling in the book and felt considerably less guilty. Don't tell me to calm down, Dodger said, taking a step towards Doc. Doc stood his ground but raised his mangled hands. Easy. I'll answer whatever questions you have. Just take it easy. I'm as easy as a goddamn Sunday morning, Dodger snapped. Doc made a soothing motion with his hands. Don't raise your voice. I'm not, Dodger said, raising his voice. I glanced around, trying to peer through the shadows between the trees. Did I hear the faint ripple of chimes, or was it my imagination? Either way, a slow animal dread climbed up my spine like a ladder. Dodger, I whispered in warning. What's going on? The raised voices must have woken Holly. She stood just off the path, her skinned hand wrapped in Doc's flannel. Even in the low light, I could see the bundle was soaked dark red. Holly took a step towards the rest of us, stumbled, caught herself. Her injury was clearly taking its toll, but she seemed the most composed out of the four of us. Don't yell, Holly said. Sorry, Dodger said, sounding frustrated but cowed. Something isn't right here. He tapped the book. It's like an immune system, Holly continued, ignoring Dodger. This house, it's responding to us like we're pathogens. She looked at the bloody flannel covering her hand. When we get afraid, upset, that's how it detects us, I think. Germs it wants to squash, Doc muttered. Okay, Doc said, pacing on the path, glaring at Doc. Fine, we'll be calm, but I want to know about the book. I want to know how many people died before you brought us here. Where did you get the book? Doc asked. Did you bring it from my study, or did you find it here in the house? What does it matter? Dodger responded. I remembered the second false study we passed through, the recreation. If you got it here, you can't trust it, Doc said. The house is only trying to get to you, to piss you off. The wind cut again across the path and I shivered. The trees, with their tatters of webs and leaves, seemed to bob up and down eagerly as if they were listening. It dawned on me then how much I hated the house, as if it were a living thing. Perhaps it was. And like all too many living things, the house appeared so needlessly cruel. If Holly was right, and we were triggering some kind of immune response, why did it have to hurt us so much? Dodger shook his head. Maybe, I don't know. What I do know is I don't trust you, Doc. We need to stick together, I chimed in, feeling like a child trying to pipe up at the adult table. Why did you line us up with Josh in the back when we first started? Dodger asked, ignoring me. I don't understand what you mean, Doc replied. You put us in a very particular order. Dodger ticked off the count with his thin fingers, drumming them against the cover of the black book. Holly, you, me, Aaron, Josh. You put us in that exact order. Why? No reason? Just so we could move in a single file line? Bullshit, Dodger spat. You put Josh in the back because he was the biggest, and he was the most likely to get stuck in that fucking hallway. And if he'd been in front, then we would have all been stuck. Listen to yourself, Dodger, Doc countered. You're paranoid. Seeing patterns and randomness. The rooms here, you've seen it, they don't make sense. They're unpredictable. How could I have known that we'd pass through that hall? Doc held up his maimed hands. The bandages around what was left of his fingers were stained brown and shredded to rags. Does it look like I know how much this crazy house is doing? Something that has riled it up, much worse than I've ever seen it. And you're not helping. That book is it's just a nest of wasps you're carrying. It's affecting your judgment. Doc reached out and Dodger pulled back. No, I haven't sorted it all out yet. But this is screwy, Dodger said. He pointed to Doc with the book. You stay here. We'll go on and look for the next door. Once we're out of here, well, I don't know, we'll send help. That's not gonna work, Dodger, Holly said gently. We can't leave anyone. Doc glanced at me. I'll need your help. Just hold him for a sec. I think the book is fucking with him. We need to separate him. I opened my mouth, not sure how to respond, but Dodger was already pulling up defensively. Don't try it, he warned me. I wasn't really planning to, I thought. Doc took a step towards Dodger. Hey, just calm. Dodger shoved Doc backwards. Doc stumbled, eyes wide, then pushed back. In the blink of an eye, they were on each other. I heard chimes ripple somewhere deep in the woods. Hey, Holly yelled, trying to pull them apart. Stop! I did my best to wrap my arms around Dodger and separate him from Doc, but he was strong for someone so wiry. While I was pulling from behind, Doc suddenly lunged forward past Holly, and he and Dodger collided. The two of them went off the path, rolling down the embankment at our side. Holly and I could only watch as they slipped out of sight into the tree line. Idiots, Holly whispered. Then she was moving, sliding down after the pair. I did my best to ignore the quiet chiming all around us as I followed. We found Doc at the edge of the tree line, scraped but unhurt. Dodger was deeper in the woods. I came down the slope. I saw Doc scramble towards Dodger, grab his arm as best as he could, and try to drag him back to us. Help! Doc shouted, turning towards Holly and me. Quick! The starlight was weak here in the shadows of all the trees, but even in the low light I could see the panic animating Dodger's face. That's when I noticed the webs, what seemed like acres of them, covering the forest floor like dust in an abandoned house. They started near the tree line and Dodger had landed at the edge of them, half stuck. He was thrashing. Please, he called out. Oh God, please pull me out. I heard hissing from farther back in the trees. A shadow the size of a large house cat dropped from nearby branches. It was a spider, dark, brown, and bloated. The thing was hissing as it cautiously approached Dodger. His panic intensified. Dodger was hyperventilating, and I saw him tear small patches of clothing and skin as he struggled to pull himself free. The spider suddenly skittered forward, fast as a whip crack, but Holly was ready, the toe of her boot catching the thing under its left legs as it came close to Dodger. It flew back, making it sound uncomfortably close to a shriek. The spider rolled as it fell, and then reared up on its back legs, exposing its underside. Its belly split vertically, and I saw a set of perfect flat teeth. A human mouth nearly the length of the spider's torso opened. The shriek came again after the thing, then a gurgling sound like it was choking. Or maybe it was laughing at us. It made one half lunge forward, then pulled back, skittering back up the tree it fell from. Help me, Doc yelled. I tore my gaze away from the high branches where the shadow of the spider had disappeared to find Doc still pulling at Dodger. Holly had situated herself behind Dodger, stepping carefully to avoid as much of the webbing as possible. She was leaning into Dodger, pushing. I joined Doc and pulled from the other side, struggling to ignore the terrible certainty I had that the laughing spider would fall from the branches above onto my back at any moment. Dodger was more hindrance than help, still thrashing against the webbing and us. Hysteria had a firm grasp on Dodger's mind for the moment. It felt like hours, though it must have been only moments when Dodger finally ripped free with a sound like bedsheets tearing. All four of us stumbled back. I saw more movement on the forest floor. Spiders, some as large as a hand, and many others nearly as big, rolled towards us like a living carpet. We scrambled, running and tripping back up the embankment. Holy shit, Holly screamed. She had been the farthest back, and I saw her kicking out desperately, trying to shake loose a few palm-sized spiders that had latched onto her legs. I turned to help pull her up the rest of the slope. Doc reached out as well, and even Dodger had recovered enough composure to grab Holly's arm and pull. The four of us landed back on the dirt trail. Dodger tore off his shirt and began whipping it down at Holly's legs, attempting to knock the creatures away. One of the spiders was torn away and Holly shrieked. The thing had been holding on with the human teeth of its belly and ripped a long piece of denim and flesh away from her calf. The spider landed near me, rearing up in mimicry of its larger relative, hissing. I was very glad I had worn heavy biking boots on this trip. My heel came down on the creature like a gavel, and there was a madly satisfying crunch. The other spider was on Holly's ankle, stubbornly holding on. Dodger couldn't seem to knock it loose. Quick as a gunslinger, Doc shot a hand out and grabbed the creature between his thumb and what remained of his fingers. With an efficient jerk, Doc popped the thing from Holly's leg, taking denim and skin with it. Holly rolled away, letting out a weak spurt of vomit. Whether from the pain or venom, I didn't know. Doc tried to fling the spider away, but it had wrapped its legs like knitting needles around his fingers. He stared down at it in disgust. Instead of biting, the palm-sized horror pulled back and spit a thin stream of murky liquid directly onto Doc's face. He screamed, ugly and raw, and fell to the ground. The impact knocked the spider free. This time it was Dodger's boot that came down, heavy and final. Doc was writhing on the ground, hands over his face, moaning. Holly was curled in the fetal position, a small puddle of sick next to her. She was silent. Dodger and I stood frozen. Then, like a dead clock jarred back into operation, we both moved at the same instant. I scanned the trail frantically for any signs of spiders. It seemed none of them had followed us up the embankment, except for the two attached to Holly. Dodger dropped down next to her, cradling her neck and tearing his shirt into a tourniquet, wrapping it around the leg both creatures had bitten. "For the venom," he said when he noticed, looking over. We had waited there for 10 or 15 minutes before Doc and Holly could move. Holly's pulse was rapid, her pupils dilated and skin clammy, but she was able to move with assistance. I prayed whatever venom was in her wasn't lethal. In the real world, I knew most spider bites weren't deadly, but wildlife in this house made the worst parts of Australia look like a petting zoo. Doc, despite not being bit, was doing much worse. His face was a pulpy mess, red and swollen and wet. Worst of all were his eyes, clouded with a milky gray film. "Not the denim. It's really dark," Doc said after sitting in silence for a long time. I can't. "We'll fix it," Dodger promised, still next to Holly. "It's just temporary." He sat shivering, holding Holly close. I could tell Dodger blamed himself for her injury, probably for Doc's as well. Personally, I saw it all as a big clusterfuck, just like the entire trip throughout the house. An ongoing accident unfolding over the course of hours? Days? I struggled to track exactly how long since we went through the blue door. I was hungry, and I was cold, and I needed a drink like a god needs worship, but all I could do was dab uselessly at Doc's eyes with my sleeve and squeeze his shoulder. He looked small, frail, sitting with his face down and his arms wrapped around his knees, more like a kid than a man at the tail end of middle age. Dodger looked drawn out as well, thin and pale. I doubt I looked much better. Holly, she'd been through the ringer. Even though she was the smallest of all of us, the most hurt. I guess Doc could argue that point. Even with all of that, she was still the one that kept us moving. "We have to go," she said, bracing against Dodger to pull herself up. Action seemed to cause a wave of nausea to hit her, but she swallowed it down. "Staying here just means dying slow." "Might be better than dying fast," Dodger muttered. But he was standing as well, propping an arm around Holly, which got him a nod of thanks. She removed her tourniquet. "It's not going to make much difference now, and we have a lot of walking to do," Holly told Dodger, handing him back the torn remains of his shirt. "But thank you." I helped Doc to his feet and played the dual roles of crutch and seeing eye dog. We were a sad little parade walking together on the trail, but we were still moving. There was perpetual night in the forest. I'm not sure how many hours we followed the path, but the sun should have gone up. And if there was a sun to rise... strange voices called out to us from the dark of the woods. They whispered and they threatened in half-formed words or garbled languages. I remembered the spiders with the human mouths on their bellies, and I sent a prayer to anything listening that whatever was in the trees would stay there. The trail terminated in an open clearing. White wicker furniture dominated the space. Chairs and lounges and tables lay scattered on the manicured grass. There was more light in the clearing, and the moon shone blue-white and low to the ground. At one edge of the glade was a massive movie screen. It looked so surreal, standing on its own, with no walls for support. "We should move on," I suggested, quickly. The words had hardly left my mouth before I heard chimes from the woods around us. "Shit," whispered Dodger. The clearing was surrounded by faceless children. Even though her features were only a blur, I recognized Holly's abandoned imaginary friends standing at the edge of the forest. Dozens of other blank forms encircled us. In the trees above them, dark shadows moved and made gibbering noises, skittering from branch to branch. "What is it?" Doc asked. "You genuinely don't want to know," Dodger said. We're surrounded." "Why aren't they moving?" Holly asked, leaning against Dodger for support. There was a dull silver gleam on the massive screen. I couldn't see a projector, but detected the faint pop and whirl of celluloid film. I sank into the nearest wicker chair. Maybe we're supposed to watch a movie? After a few moments of hesitation, everyone else found a seat. Dodger and Holly kept scanning the tree line. "I have a strong feeling we're not going to like whatever we see," Dodger muttered. Doc chuckled, a sound that rolled into an exhausted laugh. I think he could sense us staring at him. Doc winked one cloudy, blind eye. All the shit the house could throw at me, watching a film was the one I'm least afraid of. The insanity of the trip, of finding our group stuck in a clearing, surrounded by monsters, forced to watch a fucking movie, it broke something in me. I laughed. After a moment, Dodger and Holly joined in the laughter of the tired and the lost. I've been sitting here waiting for nearly an hour for the movie to start, long enough for me to type this up. My phone's battery, modern water what it is, won't last much longer, so I'm keeping it off as much as possible. The ring of blurred faces hasn't gone away, but it hasn't come closer either. Holly is doing worse. She keeps throwing up and shivering. Doc, somehow, is sleeping. "Do you still have the book?" I mouthed to Dodger as we waited. He only shook his head, then looked back to Holly as she shuddered next to him. I could feel Dodger's guilt and his fear, but I was having trouble feeling anything at all. Only tired. Well, that was part 4. Over halfway done. Part 5, the faces in the trees. I can hear the wind howl through the door in front of me. There's frost on the knob. The narrow walls are cool to the touch, and the step I'm sitting on is dusted with snow. Wooden stairs ripple below me, stopping at the faded white door. This is a long one. Yeah, it is. The wood is covered with scratches, trenches deep enough to show through the other side. When I looked, all I could see was endless white. I can't believe they're dead. It's so cold. I exhale steam and inhale ice. Warmth is leaking from me faster than blood through a gunshot, but I'm not ready to move. He's waiting. Dodger, Doc, Holly, and I watched the blank movie screen while the things in the forest watched us. Doc kept nodding off next to me, and Holly was paler by the minute. It's an awful thing watching people die slow, with no way to help, no one to call. Dodger was restless, eyeing the shadows at the tree line like he wanted to pick a fight. I didn't think that they would be any use. Instead, I stared up at the stale night sky, praying for any sign of life. The flare of a satellite or a white scar of a red-eye flight. We were awash in isolation. Images began to flicker across the theater screen. There was no sound. A woman and a boy, dark-haired with light complexions, walking together in a maze of lights. There were evergreens and neon reindeer, hanging light bulbs, stands selling hot chocolate. An ice rink was visible through the maze. Families and lovers glided across the ice in singles and pairs. Snow began to fall. The camera, home movie quality at best, pulled in on the boy, who looked vaguely familiar. Oh, Dodger said, don't do this. The woman and the boy walked on, sipping hot chocolate and watching the snow fall. Then a man joined them, carrying a basket of funnel cake. Smiling, the woman took a bite, then kissed him, leaving the impression of powdered sugar on his cheek. The boy reached up, asking to be carried. Handing the food to the woman, the man swept the boy up in his arms, and the trio moved further into the maze. They looked like a family, happy and in love, celebrating somewhere in the shadow of Christmas. Dodger was shaking in his chair. "What's wrong?" asked Holly, sitting up next to him. Dodger stared at the screen. "That's my son and my wife, ex-wife, and her new husband." The boy was light in the man's arms, held gentle and near the way a father would carry his whole world. "I'm sorry," I told Dodger. "Not as nearly as I am," he replied. The screen clipped and a new video began to play. A tall and blonde, with a soldier's haircut and a game show smile, Tom beamed down at us, standing on the stage. "Your ex?" Dodger asked Holly. "Mine," I whispered. Every fiber of a showman, Tom bowed to the crowd, sweeping off his cap. There was still no sound, but I remembered the applause he got, how the whole house stood and cheered. Everyone but me in the back corner, already drunk and angry about something I can't even remember now. The movie jumped, and now it was my apartment. Tom and I in the middle of another argument. I was yelling, pointing at the door. Tom only looked tired. There was no trace of that smile of his that could shine out even under a spotlight. He turned and walked away. One more scene, Skip. Tom alone in his car, wearing the same clothes. This must have been just after the argument, a perspective I've never seen. He was staring at the door to my building, crying silently, hands tight on the wheel. Maybe Tom was trying to decide if it was worth it to walk back again one more time. Or, more likely, he was hoping I'd be the one to finally open that door, to apologize, to do better. I never realized how long he waited watching the door before he drove away. "What happened?" Dodger asked as the screen followed the red lines of Tom's brake lights. I ran my fingers through my hair. The same thing that always happened. I drank too much and said sorry too little. We were both involved in the local theater scene, me as a writer, Tom as an actor, but only one of us was doing well. It wasn't me. Maybe I took that out on him. Maybe we were just drifting through the natural shift apart that threatens all couples and continents. Whatever it was, it made us argue, and I couldn't help but see every argument as a competition to win instead of a chance to do better. I loved feeling like I won. My writing might be mediocre, but I've always had an exceptional talent for getting under people's skin. There was just... I stopped speaking as the screen changed again. It was so strange, watching a movie without sound. All I could hear was the wind brushing the trees. No other insects or forest sounds at all. Everything happening on the screen looked loud. There was sand, high dunes, dust kicking into the air. We were watching a desert in the middle of the war zone. A trail of buckets skipped by like rocks across a pond. It was a pitched fight, a half-ring of tan Humvees circled like wagons, providing cover for about a dozen soldiers. The camera zoomed in on two figures sheltering behind the vehicles, one writhing on the ground, the other crouched above. The latter was clearly Holly, looking a few years younger, in her army kit with a red medic patch on her arm. She was wide-eyed, arms stained red. The man on the ground was porcelain pale, staring up in shock. His stomach was an open cavity of scarlet and purple, guts spilling out in wet ropes. Young Holly was desperately trying to keep the man's insides in, scooping and pushing and holding and crying. The dying soldier kept trying to speak, but it seemed like he was choking. Blood ran down his chin, outlined his lips. Jesus, Dodger whispered. Shrapnel, Holly said. No emotion in her voice, but her small hands were fists, and they trembled. I exhaled hard. A friend? More, replied Holly. More. One of the reasons they discourage relationships. It's hard watching friends die. Much worse watching someone you love bleed out on the sand because you couldn't put them back together. Holly stopped, choking down the memory. The screen flickered and went back for a few moments. Good night. When it came back, the scene was of a beach covered in snow. Chunks of ice rolled in with the tide. Snow fell in wind-snapped sheets and fog lay over the water. Most of the beach and ocean were obscured, but two figures stood out clear near the shoreline. The first was unmistakably Doc, but some younger version. He was a little less gaunt, fewer cracks around his eyes. There was still dirty blonde mixed with his graying hair. The woman standing next to him had coffee-colored skin and was built like a dancer. I recognized her as Doc's wife from the picture we'd seen in the house version of Doc's study. Both of them stood together, hand in hand, looking out over the ocean, into the fog and snow. Massive shadows moved on the horizon, hidden shapes that towered over the ocean. I was glad for the curtain provided by the snow and the clouds and mist. I had no desire to see what those things would look like, drifting figures the size of skyscrapers. What is it? Doc asked, his swollen face glossy eyes staring towards the screen. What do you see? It's you and your wife on a beach, I said. It's snowing and... Oh. Doc cut me off. That's enough. I know what that is. Dodger turned away from the screen. Doc, what happened? I lost her, obviously. I lost her. I don't need to elaborate. Okay, Dodger said. And I'm sorry, but the screen went black. At the same moment, the entire clearing flooded with noise. There was screaming in the woods, laughing, wailing, and begging. The thump of a heavy landing, trees cracking. The volume swelled until I was on the ground next to my chair, palms pressed against my ears hard enough I was afraid I'd crack my skull. All the noise stopped at the same instant. We were left in the clearing, ears still aching, and a hangover of silence. They're gone, Dodger said. He and Holly were huddled together on the ground. The creepy kids and those spider fucks that were watching us are gone. Doc was the only one of us still seated. We should go now, while we can. We walked through the forest, always on the path. Dodger helped Holly walk while I guided Doc. The four of us stayed silent. I knew I was in my head about what we had just watched, and I imagined the others were reflecting on their own movies as well. The night was getting colder and colder. I'm not sure how many hours we'd been in the forest, or days, or weeks. It all ran together, and time didn't seem to work normally within the house. I was pretty confident there wasn't going to be a sunrise no matter how long we walked. The night grew darker and less hospitable as we went. Even the stars above us were changing, the constellations growing jagged and the starlight dim. There was a new star in the sky peeking over the tree line. A red star, one that caused nausea any time I glanced at it. Doc seemed to be adjusting well to his newer, blinder reality. I only had to guide him gently. He never wavered or tripped. Holly, however, was getting worse by the hour. Venom running through her veins appeared to be wearing her down. She did her best to keep up, but struggled to walk for more than a few minutes before Dodger had to carry her. They made frequent stops whenever Holly needed to get sick by the side of the road. Dodger held her hair and did his best to comfort her, while Doc and I sat on the trail. Thank you for water. Clouds were running up from behind us, and not long after we left the theater in the clearing, the wind began to rise. A storm was biting at our heels. We tried to pick up the pace, but the forest seemed endless. The trail wound through strange places. Stretches of wood where entire cities' worth of furniture stood abandoned under the trees. There were old beds and broken chairs, dressers and nightstands and televisions, all strewn among the roots and the branches around us. It was like God had opened a dollhouse and shaken the contents out over the forest. The clouds were swift and devoured the stars above us. Hard wind ran through us like ice sharpened to a razor. At the first crack of thunder, I debated suggesting we take shelter under the trees, but I was afraid to lead the path. Even though they were silent, I knew the creatures and the children were still likely in the woods around us. It would be a risk to even approach the tree line. The decision was made for us when the first drops of rain fell fat and cold from the sky above. As the water hit my skin, I screamed. The rain burned. Each drop was like a wasp's landing. We ran for the trees without saying a word, Dodger carrying Holly. I prayed the things watching us in the clearing hadn't followed us this far. "Why do you think the house showed us those home movies back there?" Holly asked. The four of us sat together, just inside the tree line. Thunder drummed above us, but the rain was slowing down. An occasional burning drip would fall down from the branches above and leave a little stinging kiss on the exposed arms or necks. We were careful not to look up. "Because it likes fucking with us," Dodger answered. "This house has been jerking us around since we walked through the first door." "Poking," I thought. "Prodding." "But why?" asked Holly. She was shaking constantly now, her eyes unfocused. "Maybe it doesn't need a reason," Doc said. "Maybe it's just for fun. Or maybe it's a test, or all of that. None of that." Doc let out a little laugh. "Maybe it doesn't matter." Dodger looked out across the path. Lightning threaded through the sky. "When we get out of here, I'm burning your house down, Doc," Dodger said. "Sorry." Doc laughed again. If we get out of here, you have my blessing to try." Once the rain was finished, we went back to the trail. The world around us was silent and dim. Most of the stars were still cloud-covered, but an ugly red tint lay over the forest. The glow came from behind the clouds from a single blurry point of scarlet. It was like the sky was bleeding into cotton bandages. I couldn't look at the red star, it had to be a star, for long without feeling nauseous and angry. We walked on, and the world became increasingly stranger. The forest grew close and tight to the path. Soon enough, the path became only the hint of a trail through the trees. Furniture was scattered everywhere in the woods. Here and there, objects and trees merged together. There was a steep hill along our way, and after we crossed it, we found ourselves looking down on the rest of the forest. Fog was rolling in like waves. "Jesus," Dodger whispered. In the distance, half hidden by the fog and the red gloom, was the largest tree I've ever seen. It dominated the skyline, a giant spike driven into the world. And it was moving. Not just swaying in the breeze, the branches stretched and undulated with a mind of their own. I thought of a massive squid deep in the ocean, only with 100 arms, each floating away from the body. I glanced at one of the trees near us on the hill. The tree glanced back at me. A single human eye the size of a watermelon stared down from the trunk. It was bright blue. As I watched, it blinked slowly. "Hi, Bratty Cthulhu, welcome." I don't think so." "Fuck this place," I said. The rest of the group noticed the tree. The massive iris followed me as I walked closer. "Over here," Dodger called, looking up at another tree. This tree had an open mouth, wide enough to crawl through, if you were so inclined. I wasn't. A fat pink tongue dangled out of his lipless maw. The mouth smiled, showing perfect teeth, and I felt my stomach flip. I tried to stay calm, but there was something deeply unsettling about the trees beyond the obvious. They seemed aware of us, interested. "Just keep moving," Doc said, cresting the hill. I stared down at the path as I walked. Each time I glanced up at the trees closest to us, I felt worse. Several of the trunks had complete faces pressing out under the bark. There were a variety of expressions, none of them pleasant. Off in the distance, the giant tree still moved slowly. There were shining lights visible toward the end of each swaying branch. I couldn't see anything clearly through the fog, but the lights were strangely active, like beacons or lures. Once we were over the hill, I saw that the drop to the forest below was even steeper than I'd thought. We were on the cusp of a valley that stretched for maybe 100 yards. On the other side, the forest rose up again. There was a fallen tree between the two hill peaks. At the opposite side of the makeshift bridge, I saw the next door, circular and white. Oh, finally, Dodger said. Oh, thank God. Holly leaned against the nearby tree, hopefully checking to make sure it didn't have eyes or teeth. I don't think anybody yet. We still have to either cross that tree or go through the valley. I vote the valley. The tree is fine, Doc said, brushing past me. He stepped 1 foot on the trunk. The tree was wide at the base, maybe 25 feet around, and stripped bare from branches or leaves. But it seemed to get narrower as it went. No offense, Doc, I said, but how can you know if the tree is fine? Can you even see it? He turned back to me and grinned. His eyes were milky white. I can sense the tree's reliability. Have some faith. Doc began to walk across. We all shared a look, but we followed. I tried my best to not look down. Every now and then I couldn't resist. The fog was thick and rolling under us. Large silhouettes undulated below. One emerged from the mist slowly like a breaching whale. It was one of the branches from the giant tree. I could see the light on the end clearly now, blue and diluted. The glow was shaped like a woman, beautiful from the waist up. Her torso ended in a slick, oily thread that tied to the tip of the branch. She smiled at me, and I felt myself wanting to take a step towards her. Dodger grabbed my arm. Don't look, he said. Eyes down. We're almost there. Halfway across the gorge, the trunk became too narrow to walk on. We were forced to crawl one by one. Never liked heights. It was all I could do to keep worming forward. One hand in front of the other, knees wrapped around the tree, shaky desperation. Getting super eepy. Okay, have a good night. It's okay if you fall asleep. Keep going, Dodger said from behind me. I stared down at the tree, focusing on the soles of Holly's white shoes in front of me. After forever, we made it across. A small, neat deck branched out from under the white door. The four of us sat silently for a few moments after the crossing. Dodger was the first to stand up. He walked to the door and put his hand on the knob. I saw from the slump in his shoulder something was wrong. Yeah, this is a longer horror story. Locked, he whispered. I stood up and joined him. The knob, bronze and smooth, refused to turn. Some doors require a task or a price, Doc said. Dodger and I both turned and froze. Doc was holding Holly off the ground by the back of her neck. She struggled weakly, but I could see the venom, and the crossing had left her exhausted. Dodger took a step towards Doc. What are you? Casually, with hardly any sign of effort, Doc tossed Holly off of the deck. I saw a brief glimpse of her face as she went over the edge, and she was gone, dropping to the valley below. No! Dodger screamed, charging at Doc. The movement was so quick I didn't even see Doc's arm twitch, but I heard the crack of something breaking in Dodger. He dropped into a ball. The door only needs one payment, Doc told me, advancing. You can come with me if you'd like. I stood, frozen, unable to sink my mind to this new, horrible reality. Doc stopped in front of me, his face a scarred ruin with blind eyes. Well? He asked. My jaw moved, but I couldn't coax any words out into the world. Doc sighed. Not making a decision is its own decision. He walked past me. The door opened with a loyal click. I'll see you on the other side. Then Doc was gone. I ran to Dodger. He was curled in the fetal position, clutching his chest. His breathing was harsh, wheezing. From over the edge of the deck, I saw several blue lights moving towards us. We have to go, I said, trying to drag Dodger towards the door. I kept gasping, like a fish torn from the water. Or he kept gasping, excuse me. We made it halfway to the door before the first light caught Dodger. I pulled with everything I had, but he was pinned by the glowing thing at the end of the branch. This was a man, perfect like stone. I watched it take a bite from Dodger's calf. "Come on," I begged, pulling Dodger's arm. "Please, come with me." More lights were catching up to us, climbing up from the deck. Each bright shape was beautiful. They tugged at Dodger, took little bites from all over. He never screamed. "Please," I said, voice breaking. "Please, please, please." I looked down and saw Dodger staring at me. "Go," he gasped. "Find him. Kill him. Go." Dodger waved me away weakly. The bright blue lights were swarming over him, tearing off pieces as they went. I tried one last pull and his arm came off at the shoulder where they'd been gnawing at it. That was all I could handle, and I ran, and I left him there. God forgive me, I left him there. I went through the door and closed it tight behind me. After the door was a staircase headed straight down. I stopped halfway to finish this, sitting on a cold step. My phone battery is all but dead. I'm all but dead. All I can hear is the wind. The door at the bottom of the stairs is rimmed with ice. I don't want to go any further, but I can't go back. If this is it, if I die here, I'm sorry, Tom. I'm sorry I didn't walk out to the street that night. I'm sorry. Oh. We get to our final part, part 6, the dying dream. Take a quick water break. Take the last of my water. Final part, the house with 100 doors. Part 6, the dying dream. I walked through the door into a frozen world in more ways than one. Thick drifts of powdered snow lay in knee-high piles. From the other side of the door, I'd heard wind roaring. Oh, what a ride. Now that I was through, all was silent. All was still. Flickering crystals hung suspended in the air, snow caught mid-fall. The flakes burst and melted against my cheek as I passed through them. A curtain of ice and unmoving time. Doc was waiting for me a few yards from the door. He was sitting on a snow-covered stump, only one of the features in a cold white wilderness. There were no other trees, no hills, no landmarks of any kind. The sky was a motionless canopy of furrowed gray. As I came closer, Doc stood up. His eyes were deteriorating quickly, venom scars shriveling at the top half of his face. Blood-soaked bandages over both hands, clothes torn and damp with melting ice. Doc was a sorry sight. But he was grinning, and I noticed he walked across the surface of the snow, never sinking into the drifts. "Howdy," Doc called out, giving me a wave that brushed snowflakes from the sky. "What kept you?" I charged at him, tripping and nearly falling through the drifts. The fear that kept me cowering behind the last door was burning away by the sight of Doc smiling. I could picture him throwing Holly off the deck, see Dodger's face as the glowing shapes bit into him, hear the last echo of Josh's suffocating in the dark. I don't want to die here. Doc and I collided. My shoulder took him in the midsection and we both went down into the snow. I scrambled to my feet, kicking clouds of powder into the air. Doc was already up, waiting, still smiling. This stupid fucking murderous grin. I didn't plan, couldn't even think straight at all. All I wanted to do was rip him into scrap meat. The first punch caught him square and heavy. I'm proud of that, at least, even if he was just humoring me. I never managed to touch him again. Doc caught my neck swing easily, his movements too quick to follow. For a blind, broken man, he was nothing but confidence. For a moment, I stood as suspended as the air surrounded us, trapped in Doc's grip. Then he moved, a vicious tugging motion, like a pain like fireworks exploded from my shoulder with a thick pop. Doc stood over me as I curled up in the snow. My left arm was useless. "It's only a dislocation," he chided, bending over. "Here, let me take your mind off the pain." Doc reached down and touched my cheek. I tried to grab onto his wrist with my good arm, but it was useless. He swatted me aside and knelt so that his knees kept me pinned. A new flare of pain from my shoulder nearly caused me to vomit. A bright spark of rage inside my chest was gone, replaced with an animal panic. Doc's finger kept inching up my cheek, stopping to hover over my left eye. Don't. No. Don't, I said, jamming my eyes shut, trying to crawl away. Santi, thank you for the follow. Hope you enjoy the story. Please don't. Please stop. Get the fuck off me. In a second, you won't even feel what little ache in your shoulder. Doc promised. Stop. Don't touch. Smiling, Doc pressed his finger into my eye, and then kept pressing. I shrieked. The pain was overwhelming, bursting, ripping, like a red-hot nail driven into the soft jelly of my eye. Every nerve in me was seizing up. I felt his finger move inside my eye socket. Oh god. How was it possible to feel that much agony and live? Right then I was so very much wanting to die. I was thrashing, clutching at my face hard enough to leave nail marks on my cheeks and temple. Doc was right. I'd forgotten all about my dislocated arm. I screamed for a very long time, convulsing, pushing my ruined socket into the snow. Doc must have gotten off me at some point because I was free to twist and crawl to my heart's content. Eventually, my screams trailed off into whimpers, and I was still. Doc stood near me, watching. Did you get it out of your system? He asked. Or should I take the other eye? No! I shouted, no, please! No! No! No more! Shock was setting in, dulling the jagged edges, but the pain was still crippling. Doc stepped towards me and I jerked back. The only thing louder than the agony was the fear of how else he might hurt me. Doc stopped. Are you sure? If I took the other eye, we could match. Blind buddies on a long and unusual journey. I was silent. Fine, Doc said, dragging me to my feet. It hurt terribly, like walking through a cloud of wasps, but to my surprise I was able to stand. We're not quite done yet. If you stop moving, if you take another swing at me, or if I just feel like it, you'll live the rest of your life in the dark. I didn't argue. The fight was out of me. My left arm dangled limp, and every jostle came with a sick crunch. The world looked closer, more claustrophobic through one eye. Come on, Doc said, walking away. I turned to follow and noticed a new red door standing alone in the snow. Doc opened it and went through. I hesitated, but only for a moment. There's a beautiful day on the other side. We stood on a busy city street on a warm, sunny morning. The skyline looked modern, but I didn't recognize any of the buildings. Everywhere there were cars, signs of life. But just like how the snow hung in the air, the city was frozen, trapped in a single moment of time. Nothing moved. Perfect silence. The house. You probably figured it out, Doc told me walking down the motionless street, but it has far more than 100 rooms. It's everywhere, endless, weaving like veins through the body of reality. And the house touches not just everywhere, but also has every when. The past, the future, every possible past and future. Each has its own cozy room somewhere in the house. I followed Doc from a wary distance. As we drew close to the crowd of frozen people on the sidewalk, I felt my pulse quicken. Each face was a featureless blur, just like the children in the forest. It was like their personalities, their identities, were wiped away into nothing more than a smudge. Where are we? I asked, walking the street, more comfortable around the unmoving cars than the faceless people. Doc shrugged. I can't remember the name of the city. I think this is the past? Or is it the future? He turned back to me and flashed his slasher grin. You know that feeling when you move from one room into another and forget what you were doing? I get that a lot. We walked on through the city. Even the clouds above us were stuck in time, massive islands of white pinned to a blue background. I stopped. There was something above us, just out of sight. I was certain. I was wondering how long it would take you to notice, Doc said, climbing into the hood of a car, making himself comfortable. What's up there? I asked. Doc ignored me. It's late. Or maybe early? She's never consistent, which is what I love about her. Who are you talking about? Doc continued to ignore me. I felt an ember of the old anger begin to burn again. I held on to it, but kept it hidden. Molly had it right, Doc continued. When she compared the way the house reacted to us, unwelcome visitors, to how a body attacks germs. The house is alive, Aaron, and she is perfect. But she is also sick. That sickness has made her wild and troubled, confused, prone to fits. She'd been traveling this whole time through the dying body of a mad god. Okay, I said, sitting on a nearby curb, suddenly very tired. Whatever you say. Doc laughed. You don't believe me? After everything you've seen? Fatigue was beginning to make me numb. I believe you. Body of a dying god, infinite rooms, crossing space and time, yada yada. I'm just not sure if I care. Doc's smile was gone. For maybe the first time, I saw behind his careful mask. He was angry. You don't care? He asked. I shook my head. What does it change? Doc stared at me. After a few moments, I couldn't help but squirm. Do you have any idea of the roads I've walked, the worlds I've seen, the prices I've paid to see them? Doc whispered. His smile snapped back. She asks so much, has terrible needs, but the rewards are just aces, bud. Like you wouldn't believe. For example, you see time like a river, don't you? A current that only flows in one direction? The truth is, time is an ocean with conflicting tides in the house. She can teach you how to swim. Look up. I jerked my head up towards the sky fast enough that whips of pain shot through my shoulder and face. There's a humming in the world, a heavy sense of things about to shift. I saw a dark pinprick appear against the blue grove. Oh Jesus. I saw a dark pinprick appear. It's late, I'm sorry. I saw a dark pinprick appear against the blue above, covered quickly by a drifting cloud. The clouds were moving. Time was flowing. Only for a few seconds, and then everything froze again. I kept staring up at the dark spot in the sky. When my gaze fell back to earth, I yelled and scrambled back, scraping my hand against the rough sidewalk. All of the frozen, featureless people had turned their blank faces towards me. Do you care yet? Doc asked. Or should I let a few more moments pass through my fingers? I wonder what will happen. Let's see. I felt the hum again, like a pendulum beginning to swing. The faceless began to move towards me, hesitantly. They had no features to read, but somehow I knew they weren't happy to have me here. Without looking, I could feel the dark spot in the sky growing closer. I stood up and began to move towards the center of the street. Time froze again. One of the faceless was only a few feet away, reaching towards me. Doc was walking down the sidewalk. You should run, he suggested. I did. All around me, the world shuddered to life. Time moved in skips and pauses. I sprinted as fast as I could down the center line. Cars jolted forward, then froze on either side of me, and then moved again. I ran, and the faceless pursued. There was no more hesitancy in the blurred expressions. There was an unseen hate. It would lurch towards me with each pendulum swing, coming close before time stopping again. It was at a stop-motion chase punctuated by moments of snarling anger from the crowd, cut with absolute silence. Stop. Go. Stop. Go. The clock of the world advanced with grinding ticks. Doc was toying with me. I was sure of it. Pain and exhaustion slowed me to a wheezing, terrified stumble, but somehow I was always just barely able to avoid the grasping hands all around me. Above, I knew the dark thing was getting closer, falling with a strange whistle every time it moved. The sound was sharp, threatening, and familiar, like a tune I'd heard before. I ran until the city began to fall apart around here. Structures weren't destroyed or damaged, it was more like someone forgot to finish the building. I ran until I threw up, and then farther still. A nameless dread bit at my heels, which with each step a certainty that I did not want to be caught by the faceless things who stayed stuck in a time like amber. The city fell away and I ran into a rolling expanse of green fields and hills. At the top of the first hill I gasped. There were wide fields, empty except for millions of doors. They were every color and shape, covering the ground, climbing into the sky, each frame standing without walls. Doors like stars stretching out past the horizon. I kept running until my vision grew blurry. Then I turned around. I was not being followed. Wheezing, I dropped to the ground and sat gasping for air. Doc got next to me without making a noise. He leaned over until his shadow blocked the sun. "Do you care yet?" he asked. I nodded weakly. "Get up then," Doc said. We walked along the road surrounded by floating doors. They seemed to go on forever. I wondered if one of them could take me out of this place, if it could take me home. I tried to calm down and drain the adrenaline still pumping from the chase. Breathing deep, I tried to feel if any of the doors... Honestly, I don't know what the hell I was trying to sense. Maybe I wanted to use the force. Who knows? "Pick one," Doc told me, grinning. Could he read my mind? I continued to walk, my one remaining eye closed. There was a mental tug as I passed a tall yellow door a few feet from the road. We stood at the threshold for a moment. Doc made me go through first. The first thing I noticed was the tinkle of wind chimes. I was in a sunshine-drenched yard attached to a cozy ranch house with a wraparound porch. Chimes were hanging outside, swaying in the breeze. A woman opened the door. She was wearing a blue sundress. "This isn't where we're supposed to be," Doc barked behind me. "This isn't right." I felt a yank, and I was being dragged back through the door. The last thing I saw was a woman looking up. I recognized her. Doc's wife. He slammed the door once I was through. Doc stood staring at the door. His mask had slipped again, and I saw he was shaking. Not afraid, but furious. "She always does this," he said. "She pushes me, gets under my skin." "Your wife?" I asked. For a second I thought Doc was going to hurt me again, but he just started walking away. "I'll pick the fucking door," he said. He came out on a beach surrounded by fog and snow. More fog and snow. "Where are we going?" I asked. Doc was forging ahead, leaving a trail through the sand and snow. The tide broke against the shore, great floats of ice cracking with each wave. Gray mist and clouds cut visibly down to the next to nothing, but I could see the shadows moving over the water. Forms the size of skyscrapers, dark spots walking through the ocean. It put a chill in me to look at them, even obscured. The old fear, terror of the unknown, and of things that did not belong. They seemed to be waiting. Doc turned back. "We're almost done. I know it hurts. Don't stop now." I sat down, wincing at the cold. "I am done, though. If you're gonna kill me, just do it." Sighing, Doc walked back and sat down next to me. He watched the massive creatures in the fog and listened to the crash of the half-frozen waves. "This is as good a place as any, I guess," Doc said. "It's been a hell of a run, eh?" I thought the feeling of my eye popping in its socket, Dodger's face, Holly's face, Josh's last words. "Why did you do all of this?" I asked. "Why did you fucking have to do all of this to us?" Doc paused before replying. A part of me is sorry. Please understand that. But the house requires sacrifice. Them's the breaks. She needs us, you. And I'm her caretaker. So what other options do I have?" Doctor turned towards me, his eyes almost sad. "She didn't trust me anymore. Did you know that? None of her nurses did either. Bunch of worrywarts. They don't think I'm competent enough to take care of her. But I'm starting to crack. But I'm still steady." He giggled. The shadows in the mist were moving closer. I saw with rising fucking alarm that the tide was washing up closer and closer with each wave. The water was rising. Or maybe we were sinking. I wondered how cold the ocean would be and what might be in it. I'm glad it's here for this. I'm glad it's you here for this, Doc said. I promised her I'd let her choose, either me or someone better. Luckily, you're not better. Josh was kinder. Dodger was more clever. I was as brave as the three of you soggy blankets put together. Yet here you are, the last man standing, sitting, whatever you are. I looked out over the water. When the tide comes, they'll take you. It'll only hurt for a moment. I was breathing hard. I've always feared deep water, but something Doc said stuck with me. She didn't trust me. Starting to crack. I promised I'd let her choose. Why doesn't why doesn't she trust you? I whispered. Don't worry about it, Doc replied. I was staring at him, gears in my mind finally beginning to click. The house needs someone calm, doesn't she? Someone steady? Every time someone was angry or afraid, that's when they were in danger. I did tell you all to relax, didn't I? Doc muttered. Not my fault you weren't good enough. Are you? I asked, the seed of a desperate plan taking root. What makes you special? Why should you take care of her? Doc pinned me with a blind stare. You have no idea. No frame for understanding what I've given up to be here. The ledger I've paid. The cost. A woman in a blue sundress. Doc holding the hand of his wife as they waited. On a beach. What happened to your wife, Doc? I asked. He never stopped staring. The tide was already brushing against our feet. You don't get to ask about her, he replied. His mask was slipping again. He was angry. Did you give her up? Did you give her to the house? I continued. Doc stood up. You're about to die here, Aaron, and you'll die ugly. I also got to my feet. The water rolled back in, knee high. Did she trust you? Did she know what you were doing? Stop talking, Doc said, walking towards me. I began to backpedal, trying to move us towards the ocean. She didn't know, did she, your wife? You don't know the first thing about it, Doc growled. Not the first fucking thing. But I can guess, I said, nearly slipping as the tide broke against my waist, chunks of ice nearly bowling me over. The house has been dropping hints, hasn't it? Your picture in the gallery, your video in the theater. They were all about your wife. They were all about the loss of your wife. You told us before that you'd visited the house many times with many people, exploring, recording. That's something you two did together, right? How many trips did you take before you decided to give her to the house? I kept forgetting how fast Doc could move. His grin was gone, his little mask pulled away, teeth bared, face tight with rage and hate. He was on me before I could run. You don't get to talk about her. Doc spat, hands around my throat. I was saved by the water slamming into both of us, knocking Doc away and dragging us out into the ocean. My last glimpse of Doc was him swimming towards me like a shark, screaming, desperate to hurt me. The sea was rough, churning with white caps and ice. Before Doc could reach me, I saw him go under like he was plucked from below. I felt a tug and took a last frantic breath. Then I was underwater in the cold and the dark. I sensed massive things moving around me. I kept waiting for a hand or a tentacle or jaw to find me, but I realized I wasn't afraid to die. Well, okay. I was scared shitless, but that was balanced by a new calm. At least I knew everything was over, and if I died there in the freezing water. Trolling Doc was my final act. Felt like a fitting curtain call on the whole fucked up experience. But I didn't die. The darkness closed in on me as my air ran out and I lost consciousness. I awoke washed up on a different beach, one with a warm sand and clear skies. My first few minutes on shore were spent vomiting up a really excessive amount of seawater. When I was finally able to stand, I saw that the beach was stunningly beautiful. Towering cliffs overlooked the shoreline. I saw a paved path winding its way up to the ridge. Having not a hell of a lot else to do, I started walking. The sunshine was clean and welcoming. There was a house on top of the cliff. I recognized it as Doc's house, as the house. bright gardens surrounded the property. I heard the lethargic buzz of bees. The smell of flowers was overwhelming, fresh as a sunrise. You took in an entire spring with each breath. I gave real consideration to the possibility that I may have died and gone to literal heaven. Then I noticed the people tending the gardens. They were dressed all in white. The one nearest me looked up from the flowers they were pruning. The figure's face was featureless smudge. Oh, for fuck's actual fucking sake, I muttered, running back down the path. Took you long enough, a familiar voice called out. I froze. One of the things in white was walking towards me, peeling off gardening gloves. He had a blur for a face, but I still somehow recognized him. Maybe it was his voice, or his frame, or the way he moved, or all of it put together. Hey, Josh, I whispered. Josh reached out his hand. I gave him a tentative shake. What the fuck? I asked. Even without a mouth, I could tell Josh smiled. Kind of a trip, isn't it? He said. I nodded. Also, you're dead? Yep. She collects people who die in the house. Those who can escape their new normal, they come here. Those who can't, you probably met them already. Who is she? I asked. Josh pointed to a place further down the cliff. A woman sat in a wheelchair at the edge overlooking the beach below. Even from a distance, I could see that she was much, much larger than the person had any right to be. She is the house, and the house is her, Josh told me. I don't know her name. In all my time here, I've never been able to find it. I think she's had many names, but even she seems to have forgotten them. She's dying, Aaron. She's been dying for a long, long time. We try to keep her comfortable. As she dies, she sleeps. And when she sleeps, she dreams. Her dreams have a habit of becoming real, escaping from the house and going on their way. Her nightmares are... well, we try to keep her calm, and her dreams are peaceful. That's why the house needs a steady caretaker, someone who can keep their head in a crisis. The house and the dreamer are the one and the same. Take care of the house, and you protect the dreamer. We don't want her to have troubled dreams, and we absolutely do not want her to wake up. I stared at the woman in the wheelchair. She was wrapped in sweaters and blankets and had long silver hair. Her head was slumped to her shoulder. I wonder what she was dreaming of that right then. What happens when she wakes up? I asked. Josh shrugged. You're not sure. Nothing good. Some of us fear that the whole reality is all part of her dying dream. That's why we need you to take care of the house, Aaron. What do you say? I chewed at my lip, not ready to answer. You said before in all my time here. Josh, you've only been dead for maybe a couple days. He laughed. Oh, I've been here much longer than that. You've seen that time works differently here. How long have I been in here? I asked. Quite a while, Josh replied. You're avoiding my question. Doc went native on us. The house needs a caretaker. You're the only option we have at this point. Sorry. What do I need to do? Josh sighed. Well, there's a book in the house, your house, that explains everything. I'll be honest, you won't like it, but I promise it's necessary. I try to focus on the good things, the warm sun, the ocean air. What if I say no? No one can force you to take this burden, but I truly hope that you do. It is a terrible responsibility, but there are certain rewards, Josh said. I don't want them. I don't want any of this. I know, he said. We stood together for a long moment, listening to the waves. I looked around the garden. Dozens of faces, faceless workers in white, were standing, watching us, waiting. I recognized a few in the crowd. There was a blonde, short, and lithe, standing next to a tall man. They were holding hands. It made me smile. One of the figures seemed fixated on me in particular. He had tattered gray hair, and I didn't need to see his face to know he was scowling. I waved. So, what's the verdict? Josh asked. I guess I don't have much choice, I replied. I'll agree on one condition. How do I get the fuck back to the real world? Josh smiled and pointed towards the front door of the house. Took one last look at the woman on the cliff. Then I walked along the garden path. Went through the door, found myself back where everything began, standing in Doc's house. My house. I found the book Josh mentioned in the library. It was the Black Book, the one Doc warned us not to read. Everything about the house is here. Its history, its needs. There are entries from every caretaker who has ever watched over the house and the dreamer. Diaries, pages, and pages of attempts to map the rooms in the house, to classify the inhabitants that live here, and to track the things that get out. Most days it feels like it's all too much, too difficult, and would require me to cross lines that can't ever be redrawn. I started writing down an entry about my first trip through the house. I wanted to make sure that there was a record of what happened to Josh, Dodger, and Holly. That anyone who reads the book, even if it's just future caretakers, knows that they were all good people, put in a terrible situation, who did the best that they could. I'm glad some echo of them lives on. It's hard to get used to being back. I find myself checking the doors and windows multiple times a day, half convinced I'm still stuck. But this feels real, like I'm out, like I'm living. I don't know. There's this gravity to the doors in this house, especially the blue one on the second floor. I understand why Doc kept going back to explore the rooms. I'm not ready to take another trip. I'm not sure if I ever will be ready, honestly. If I go, I might not find my way back to the real world ever again. Though, if Josh is right, and everything is only part of the uneasy dream of some dying god, maybe there's no such thing as the real world. And that concludes our story of the house with 100 doors. That one was quite long, but it was really, really good. At least I thought so. I hope you guys liked it as well. There definitely is, definitely some points I was shocked to see the sort of turn of events. I was really surprised with the early kill of Josh in the first, excuse me, the first chapter, so to speak, the first part. Oh wait, God, my voice is shot. I'm so sorry. I do like the time distortion, where you couldn't ever really tell what time it was, where maybe it only felt like a couple days, but realistically they could have been in here for years. Doc being the real villain wasn't too shocking, but definitely was interesting of not knowing how many times he truly went through the house. Because by the sounds of it, it was easily like tens of times for how often, how old he was, and how well versed he seemed with the house. All the rules that were in place. If the door was locked, you had to do a task. If there was a being inside the room, if they ask you a question, you have to answer. If there was like certain attributes in the rooms, it could be good or bad. It's definitely an interesting premise. I do really enjoy it. If any of you are interested in more of his works, he does have a whole, basically like, archive that is on the Reddit NoSleep server. He also has his own website. That is travisbrownwriting.com. He has 2 published books. One was actually House with 100 Doors. The other one is How to Build a Haunted House. So if you're interested in more of his works, just from these couple stories that we read, I am definitely a fan of his now. And I hope that you guys are too. But it is quite late. It is about to be 3 p.m. Eastern. So for anyone that stuck around, good job, proud of you. Anyone that didn't, I don't blame you, it's quite late. But thank you again for sticking around. I think I will just sort of end it here. It is quite late. But I will be back tomorrow. We're going to be doing more Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga with Kai and friends. So look forward to that. Hopefully my voice won't be too terribly shot tomorrow. And then I'll find another day that we can continue Paper Mario, because we are really, really close to the end. I think we're in chapter 7. So we'll get that wrapped up too. But hope you all have a wonderful rest of your night. Stay safe, stay hydrated. Don't go into any weird doors. And don't go outside if you hear whistling at 3:03 a.m. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye!